Hey guys, tonight we drift back, not just a few decades, not even a few centuries, but thousands of years, into a world before anyone had heard the word baseball. The sun is a molten coin above an endless plain, and somewhere a group of children laugh as they chase a leather-stuffed ball with a stick carved from olive wood. You wouldn't survive a single inning here, not without bug spray or tetanus shot. But that's part of the charm, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand barefoot on packed earth, the kind that smells faintly of dust and sweat and something eternal. Somewhere near the Nile, around 2400 BCE, a wall painting in an Egyptian tomb shows two figures holding curved sticks. They face one another, a ball between them. Some scholars think they're playing a ritual game, maybe a forerunner of field hockey, maybe something more like baseball's distant ancestor. Others argue it's pure ceremony. No competition, no score, just rhythm and motion offered to the gods. The truth, as usual, is lost in the silt of time. You blink, and the scene shifts. Now you're in ancient Persia, where warriors practice chavgan, a horseback ball game that will one day become polo. In Greece, children toss balls of linen wound tight with string. In Rome, soldiers play pila, smacking it between them with open palms. Every civilization, it seems, invents its own excuse to hit, throw, and chase something round. The impulse is older than nations, older than logic itself. There's something human about the arc of a ball through air, something we've always wanted to follow. By the Middle Ages, that impulse takes on rougher shapes. You find yourself standing outside a small English village, the 1300s perhaps, when the plague is a rumor and the harvest a gamble. The smell of smoke drifts from thatched cottages. In a muddy field, peasants play a game called stool ball. One player guards a milking stool, another hurls a ball made of rags or cork, and the crowd cheers every hit. Some say the milkmaids invented it, striking the ball with their milking stools between chores. Others claim it began as a flirtation game, boys tossing to girls, laughter as strategy. No one really knows. What's certain is that it was one of the first times a stick met a ball for points, pride, and pleasure. You crouch by the sidelines. The ball bounces wildly, and someone yells something that might be run, or might just be laughter. There are no gloves, no fences, no rules written down. Yet, as you watch the batter swing, you can almost hear the whisper of the modern game. That satisfying crack, the gasp of the crowd. It's primitive, but familiar. Centuries pass in a blink. You drift through the green fields of Tudor England, where another version of stool ball emerges, this time under the name baseball. Yes, baseball. The word itself appears in a 1744 children's book titled A Little Pretty Pocketbook. There's even a picture. Players running around posts, a bat in hand. The rhyme underneath reads, "The ball once struck away, must be run to the next base." So much for the idea that baseball was purely American. Its name, at least, had British roots. But language, like sport, evolves in strange ways. The same century sees cricket rising, organized, codified, fiercely British. Cricket becomes the gentleman's game, the slow afternoon pursuit of empire. Baseball, meanwhile, lingers as a rustic cousin, played by children, servants, and village loafers. It isn't yet professional, isn't yet mythic. It's something you do because the day is long and the grass is green and there's a stick nearby. You move north to Scotland, where rounders takes shape, another bat and ball pastime. There are 4 bases, teams, and a bowler instead of a pitcher. The similarities are uncanny. Some historians swear that Rounders is the true parent of baseball, smuggled across the Atlantic in the minds of English immigrants. Others insist the American game grew independently, a homegrown evolution from countless local amusements. Nobody agrees, and perhaps nobody can. You start to see a pattern forming here. Wherever people have time and open space, they find ways to play with what the world gives them. A gust of cool wind carries you to 18th century France, where children play la balle empoisonnée, the poisoned ball. You can hear them shrieking with laughter as they dodge and throw, as though danger were part of the delight. Maybe, you think. Every sport begins as a survival instinct disguised as play. Swing the stick, avoid the blow, run faster than your rival. Evolution in miniature. Even the equipment tells its own story. The earliest bats weren't flat planks or sleek Louisville sluggers. They were knotted branches, sometimes curved, sometimes crude. Balls were stuffed with hair, cloth, cork, anything that bounced and didn't break a window. You picture some medieval craftsman binding leather around sheep's wool, not knowing he's laying the groundwork for a future empire of sports memorabilia. Somewhere, a bell tolls. The shadows lengthen. You find yourself sitting at the edge of a village green, the evening cool and damp. The players are gone now. The field is empty. Insects hum above the grass. You think about how long humans have been doing this. Hitting, running, cheering, arguing. You realize that the history of baseball isn't a straight line from invention to perfection. It's a wandering trail of human need. The need to connect, to compete, to feel the clean rush of motion and the quiet ache of failure. The first verified fact of this strange lineage is simple. By the 1700s, bat and ball games were already common in Britain and Europe, often called base, rounders, or town ball. That's a matter of record. The quirky part? Some versions were used as courting rituals. A boy might choose a girl as his teammate, their partnership sealed by a run around the bases, symbolic, suggestive, scandalous to prudes of the parish. And the uncertain piece? Well, nobody knows exactly when or where the rules began to take shape. Did someone, somewhere, finally say, "Let's write this down"? Or did it just evolve through endless summer afternoons, as casual as gossip and as enduring as laughter? You close your eyes. The air smells faintly of cut hay. In the distance, you can almost hear the clack of wooden bats, the slap of hands on knees, the rising cheer of victory. The world is smaller then, simpler. No stadium lights, no roaring crowds, no commentators talking statistics. Just people, a field, and the eternal echo of a ball finding its mark. And as the stars start to bloom over the English countryside, you realize something comforting. The game we call baseball didn't appear out of nowhere. It grew like ivy, from older games, older joys, older hungers. It's not just a sport. It's an inheritance, passed from one tired set of hands to another across millennia. You lean back, listening to the night, to the quiet rhythm of history unfolding like innings played in the dark. The night drifts away, and with it the centuries. Dawn rolls across the damp fields of England, a soft mist clinging to the hedgerows. You're standing somewhere in the English countryside, mid-1700s, where a few shepherds and farmhands gather on a rare afternoon off. They bring with them a rough ball stitched from scraps of leather, a sturdy stick that's been whittled to fit the hand just right, and a scatter of wooden posts hammered into the ground. This isn't war. This isn't church. It's play. And yet, this little circle of laughter and movement will one day ripple outward, reshaping the leisure of nations. The English roots of baseball smell faintly of ale and grass. You can hear the clinking of pint glasses from a nearby tavern. Between rounds of rounders, the players joke, complain about the weather, and trade bets over who can hit the farthest. The term baseball floats through the air like a rumor, appearing in parish records, children's rhymes, and that now famous A Little Pretty Pocketbook, printed in 1744. The illustration shows a player swinging a bat while others dash between bases. Simple, joyful, undeniably familiar. Mainstream historians agree that rounders is the clearest ancestor of baseball. It was especially beloved by English schoolchildren and Irish villagers. Teams of young men and women, often mixed, played it in open meadows. A pitcher, known as a feeder, lobbed the ball toward the batter, who swung a flat-faced bat and then sprinted for the next base before the ball returned. Scoring was loose, arguments frequent, and the rules shifted depending on who brought the ball. Yet the rhythm, the hit, the run, the tag, already carried the same pulse you'd recognize today on a modern diamond. You crouch near one of those games, your boots sinking into damp soil. The players shout over the wind. A red-haired boy connects with the ball. It sails into the field, and a cheer goes up. He races to the first post, nearly colliding with a laughing girl who tries to tag him with her hand. The moment is brief, unrecorded, and utterly ordinary. Still, it's the heartbeat of something grand. The quirky side of the story? In the Georgian era, these games weren't just for children. Adults, particularly in rural villages, used them as excuses to mingle, flirt, and even challenge rival towns. Sunday games might end with feasts, folk songs, and, inevitably, the occasional drunken brawl. One London newspaper from the 1700s grumbled about youths disturbing the peace with their violent baseball sport. Imagine, before it was America's national pastime, baseball was considered a minor menace to public order. You wander onward, time slipping like fog through your fingers. The Industrial Revolution is just beginning to grumble in the background. Britain's fields start to shrink as factories rise, but the urge to play persists. Cricket becomes the sport of gentlemen, long, orderly, and bound by strict codes. Rounders remains the people's game, informal and alive. But something curious happens. As England formalizes one pastime, another begins to wander westward. Ships set sail for the American colonies, carrying not just goods and tools, but games. Children aboard those ships toss balls to each other on deck. Settlers bring their favorite amusements to the New World: cards, bowls, and those stick and ball contests from home. On warm afternoons, colonial farmers in Massachusetts or Pennsylvania knock together bats and play something they call base, town ball, or one old cat. The names differ, the rules shift, but the spirit is identical. Scholars still debate how much direct influence rounders truly had on early American baseball. Some say it was everything. Others argue that American base evolved in parallel. There's a kind of poetic uncertainty to it, like two vines twisting up the same trellis from opposite sides, meeting in the middle by fate. You find yourself now in an English grammar school around 1800. The teacher, strict but fair, allows the boys a brief recess. They spill out onto the green and form two teams. Their voices carry across the fields. "Batter ready," one shouts. The pitcher tosses underhand. The ball bounces, the bat swings. You can almost see the invisible threads connecting this small schoolyard to future stadiums packed with thousands. The uniform doesn't exist yet. The scorecards are still imaginary. But the magic of the play, the clean geometry of hit and chase, already glows. Then, a subtle transformation begins. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, baseball starts appearing in English diaries and newspapers with increasing frequency. One entry, written by a young woman named Jane Austen, yes, that Jane Austen, mentions a family game of baseball. Imagine her, author of Pride and Prejudice, picking up a bat and laughing across a meadow. The scene feels both genteel and rebellious, as though the stiff corsets of English propriety loosen for one lazy afternoon. You smile. It's strange to think that a sport now drenched in statistics and million-dollar contracts once belonged to flirtatious village dances and literary families at play. Another verified fact. The word baseball in English predates its American reinvention by nearly a century. The earliest printed mention, again, was 1744. That little book, sold for children, included a moral lesson. Good behavior earns you toys. Bad behavior earns you a whipping. Baseball was seen as a wholesome reward, a way to build virtue. A far cry from the beer-soaked bleachers of modern ballparks. But there's also a mystery that scholars still chase. Why did baseball disappear from England's mainstream consciousness while it exploded across the Atlantic? Some suggest the rise of cricket overshadowed it, absorbing its players and prestige. Others believe social class played a role. Cricket appealed to the elites, while baseball stayed rustic, too rough for polite society. By the time Queen Victoria took the throne, the game had already faded from British lawns, and yet, as it waned in Britain, it found fresh soil in America. There the fields were wide, the afternoons long, and the sense of reinvention strong. Immigrants carried their versions of the game to small towns and frontier settlements, blending English rounders with local flair. Children played in streets and cow pastures, marking bases with stones or hats. No one could have guessed they were laying the foundations for a national identity. You can almost see the ocean stretching out before you, the Atlantic gleaming like a mirror of possibility. A ship creaks at the dock, ropes straining. Somewhere below deck, an Englishman packs his things. Maybe a bat carved from ash. Maybe a single scuffed ball. He has no idea that this small token of home will help birth a new mythology across the sea. The wind smells of salt. The horizon hums with the sound of gulls. You linger a moment longer, watching the last game fade into twilight. The players laugh, shake hands, and head toward the tavern, leaving behind a trampled patch of earth where something remarkable has just been rehearsed. One last quirky note before you go. Some of those early English games had rather strange penalties. If a player failed to reach a base before being tagged, they might have to carry another teammate on their back for a lap or pay for the next round of ale. The lines between punishment and celebration were wonderfully blurry. As night settles again, you realize how small the beginnings always are. The great myths of sport don't start with trumpets. They start with laughter in a field, with dust on your boots, with a simple joy shared under an open sky. Baseball, before it was ever America's pastime, was just that, a pastime. A way to chase a moment of freedom, even if only until the church bells called you back, and as you step away, the sounds of the game fade into memory. The thud of leather, the cry of "run," the flutter of a ball rising against the dimming sun. The scene softens into a watercolor of green and gold. The story, though, is just beginning to cross the sea. The sea is restless tonight. You stand on the deck of a creaking wooden ship, the wind sharp with salt and promise. Beneath your boots, the Atlantic groans and heaves. It's the 1700s, and you're sailing toward the new world, not as a conqueror or a missionary, but as a passenger among hundreds of others carrying pieces of the old world tucked into their memory. They've brought their languages, their songs, their bread recipes, and their games. One of the sailors on deck, barefoot, sleeves rolled, tosses a small leather ball between his hands as he laughs with another man. It's barely dawn, but already they've chalked out an imaginary field using ropes and barrels. Someone grabs a broom handle and calls for a pitch. The first sailor grins, tosses the ball, and the bat connects with a hollow thock. It arcs over the deck rail, into the gray sea below. The crew erupts in laughter, and though they don't know it, they've just played the first unofficial game of base in the New World. The wind slaps against your coat. You watch the ship drift through fog and time, each wave pulling you closer to the colonies, where something ancient will take new form. The English brought rounders. The Germans brought similar stick games. The Irish brought hurling. All these small pieces of joy scatter like seeds across a continent still defining itself. When you arrive in the colonies, Massachusetts first, the air smells of pine and smoke. Wooden houses squat near frozen fields, and life here is hard. Work fills every daylight hour, but even the Puritans need moments of play. You see young men gathered behind barns, hitting a leather ball with a stick. They call it base, or town ball, or sometimes old cat. Each region has its own twist. 3 bases instead of 4, or 2 batters facing each other in turn. There's no single rule book, only the rhythm of laughter and motion. You step closer. The bat is rough, the ball hand-stitched. When someone connects, the sound echoes across the fields like a gunshot. The runner bolts toward a pile of stones that mark first base, his boots pounding against the earth. The catcher lunges, trying to peg him out by throwing the ball. It's messy, chaotic, thrilling, and it's spreading. By the early 1800s, these town ball games are everywhere. In Pennsylvania, in New York, in the Carolinas. You can feel the land itself widening under your feet, full of possibility. America is still young, its towns small, its people restless. They build homes, they farm, they argue. And in the rare hours between, they play. One of the earliest mentions of the game in America appears in a letter from a Princeton student in 1786 who writes about playing baseball on campus. That's your verified historical fact for the night. By the time of the Revolution, baseball had already crossed the Atlantic and taken root. Not as a grand invention, not as a formal sport, but as a pastime, improvised and alive. A curious thing about early American baseball is how democratic it was. Anyone could play. Farmers, merchants, schoolboys, even soldiers on training grounds. The equipment was cheap, the rules flexible. In a young nation obsessed with freedom and self-reliance, this kind of open rule-light game fit perfectly. But there's a quirky detail too. Back then, some versions of the game allowed soaking. That meant if you wanted to get a runner out, you didn't tag them, you threw the ball at them. Hard. Sometimes very hard. You can almost feel the sting just thinking about it. Picture a line drive straight to someone's back as they try to reach base. The rules weren't so much written as shouted mid-play. That counts. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. I hit him square in the shoulder. Games often ended in arguments, laughter, or both. And yet, even amid the rough play, the bones of modern baseball are already visible. The diamond shape, the pitcher and batter, the scorekeeping, all there in miniature. It's as if the game already existed, waiting for someone to notice its potential. You wander south to Virginia, where wealthy planters sometimes host gatherings for workers and neighbors. They bring out cider, roast meat, and clear an open field. The music of fiddles floats through the air. After dinner, someone shouts, "Who's up for base?" And the crowd cheers. Children chase foul balls into the trees. The laughter is easy, the movement familiar. It's here you realize. This isn't just a game. It's a social glue. In a world without radios, without screens, without the hum of machines, a game like this becomes conversation, celebration, and escape all at once. You travel west with the settlers, through the wild forests of Ohio and Kentucky. Baseball, or what they still call town ball, travels too. On the frontier, space is abundant, but company is scarce. So when new neighbors arrive, you play. You teach them the rules as best you can. The bases might be tree stumps, the bat and axe handle, but the spirit is the same. Someone always says, just one more inning, as the sun sets behind endless trees. Historians still argue about how organized the early American versions really were. Were there formal clubs? Some think so. In Philadelphia and New York, records show groups forming to play regularly by the 1820s. Others believe it remained mostly informal until mid-century. The truth probably lies somewhere between, a patchwork of local customs slowly weaving into one fabric. By 1830, newspapers mention baseball as a popular pastime, and illustrations show men in the waistcoats and top hats swinging wooden bats. The game is no longer just for children. Gentlemen play it now, too, especially in cities, where parks and open lots serve as makeshift fields. You stroll through New York in 1835. The city smells of horses and coal. Amid the noise, you hear the faint crack of a bat from a vacant lot. There's a group of clerks playing during lunch, their coats hung on a fence, their laughter echoing between brick walls. A crowd gathers to watch. Someone shouts, "He's safe!" And for a moment, the workday feels far away. The growing cities give baseball something vital. Visibility. Games once played in hidden meadows now unfold in public view. People pass by, stop, and linger. Before long, they're asking to join. A strange thing about America in these decades is how fast it changes. Railroads, factories, telegraphs. The pulse of progress beats louder every year. Amid that noise, baseball feels like something pure, something simple. It's a way to breathe, and maybe that's why it spreads so fast. There's another quirky fact for you. The earliest recorded baseball uniforms appeared not with professionals, but with amateur clubs in the 1840s. Knickerbocker players in New York wore straw hats and blue wool pants. Imagine sweating through a 9-inning game in that outfit. But style mattered. It marked the shift from casual pastime to organized sport, but we're not quite there yet. For now, in the 1830s and 1840s, the game remains wonderfully inconsistent. In Massachusetts, the mass game version allows you to score by hitting the ball over a fence. In Philadelphia, town ball includes as many as 20 players a side. In New York, things are starting to look more standardized, but only barely. The uncertainty surrounding these early rules is almost folkloric. No one can quite agree who did what first. Did New Yorkers really invent the diamond-shaped field? Did Philadelphia's clubs first use 3 strikes? Did Boston invent the word outfield? The arguments, even today, are endless. You pause on a quiet field outside of Cooperstown, New York, a name that will later become mythic. The grass whispers in the breeze. Somewhere, a farmer's son is tossing a ball against a barn wall, dreaming of bigger games. He doesn't know that in a few decades, someone will claim his hometown as the birthplace of baseball. But for now, the game is still free, fluid, anonymous, unclaimed. You think about those players, sweaty, laughing, arguing over whether a runner was safe. They don't care about fame or origin stories. They just want to play until the light fades. That's the beauty of this early era. Baseball exists everywhere and nowhere at once. It belongs to no single man, no single place. It's passed along by hands and hearts, evolving in small, invisible ways. A slightly smoother bat, a tighter ball. A new idea shouted mid-game, each change pushing it closer to what it will become. The quirky footnotes of this period make you smile. Some communities had ghost men, imaginary runners left on bases when teams lacked players. Others used balls made of fish skin or tightly wound rags. In one New England village, the pitcher's mound was literally a mound, a small hill of dirt used for planting onions the rest of the year. And yet, amid all the absurdity, something sacred glows beneath it. The shared rhythm of the game. A throw, a swing, a sprint, a cheer rising into the air like smoke. By the late 1830s, as America edges toward industrial might and cultural unity, baseball begins to demand structure. The players, now young professionals and businessmen, want clarity. They crave fairness, consistency, something beyond local quirks. It's coming soon. But before that, there's still a decade of wild improvisation left. You linger a little longer on the frontier field. The players are calling it a night. The bats are leaning against a fence, and the air is cooling fast. Fireflies blink over the grass like tiny lanterns. Someone hums a tune that will one day be sung in stadiums, though no one could know it yet. You realize you've witnessed the game's crossing, from an old world pastime to a new world obsession. It's not fully formed yet, not even close, but the energy is there, the seed ready to sprout. As you turn away, the last words you hear are from a farmer wiping his hands on his trousers. "Good game," he says. "Same time next week?" And in that small promise, unwritten, unrecorded, baseball's future is quietly secured. You wake to the sound of morning birds and the murmur of a small town coming to life. Horses clopping on cobblestones, the faint clatter of shopkeepers opening shutters. It's 1839, and you find yourself standing in Cooperstown, New York. The air is crisp, the hills gentle, and the myth is just beginning. Somewhere nearby, a farm boy named Abner Doubleday, at least according to legend, is about to invent baseball. You glance around, expecting to see a group of men in crisp uniforms drawing chalk lines on a field. Instead, you see something humbler. A handful of young men gathered on a grassy lot, using stones for bases and a stick shaved into shape for a bat. They're laughing, arguing, calling plays by instinct. Nobody's writing anything down. Nobody thinks they're changing history. And that's the truth, because Abner Doubleday never invented baseball at all. The story, though, is irresistible. A clean, patriotic origin for a sport that will soon define a nation. A game invented not by evolution or cultural borrowing, but by a single genius in an upstate village. It's too tidy to be true, and yet, for decades, it's the version America clings to. Let's pause for a verified fact. There's not a single shred of evidence that Abner Doubleday had anything to do with baseball. He was a real man, yes, a West Point cadet in 1839 who would later fight in the Civil War. But he never wrote about baseball, never claimed to create it, and likely never even played it. The entire myth was stitched together much later in 1907 by a special commission desperate to prove that baseball was an all-American invention, not borrowed from British games like rounders. You can almost picture that commission. A panel of older gentlemen sitting in a smoky room, arguing over letters, anecdotes, and patriotic pride. One of them, a former baseball executive named Albert Spaulding, declares that baseball must be American, because America is big enough to create its own games. Convenient, isn't it? Then comes Abner Graves, a man from Cooperstown, who writes to the commission claiming he saw Doubleday draw a diamond in the dirt and explain the rules to the local boys. The panel seizes on the tale like a line drive into an open glove. There it is, they say. Baseball was born in Cooperstown. And just like that, history gets rewritten, not by facts, but by nostalgia. You lean against a fence, watching the town wake up. It's beautiful here, peaceful. You can almost understand why people wanted to believe the myth. America, by the late 19th century, was a young empire searching for its own folklore. Baseball was more than a pastime. It was identity, pride, even proof that the nation could invent beauty on its own terms. The quirky side of this story lies in how stubbornly the myth endured. Even after historians dug up evidence showing baseball's gradual evolution, the Cooperstown legend held strong. In 1939, Major League Baseball built the National Baseball Hall of Fame right here, cementing the fiction in bronze and marble. Today, thousands of visitors still wander its halls, unaware, or perhaps unbothered, that the story they're celebrating isn't quite true. But let's rewind to the real 1839, when the game was still fermenting in the cities and open fields of America. While Doubleday was studying military tactics, the players of New York City were busy forming clubs and refining their baseball into something recognizable. In parks and empty lots, they were arguing over rules, experimenting with field sizes, and shaping the future of the game. One friendly match at a time. You stroll through Manhattan, past the red brick buildings and horse-drawn carts. It's 1840-something now, and the city hums with commerce and invention. Down on Madison Avenue, a group of young businessmen, clerks, bank tellers, and storekeepers, gather after work to play. They call themselves the Knickerbocker Baseball Club. Their leader, Alexander Joy Cartwright, is a meticulous man, fond of order and fairness. He's tired of the chaos of town ball, where every neighborhood has its own strange rules and disputes last longer than the games. So, in 1845, Cartwright and his teammates write something radical. The first codified rules of baseball. 20 rules in total, simple but revolutionary. Here's your historical fact. Rule number 13 establishes foul territory for the first time, defining where the ball must land to count as fair. Rule number 10 fixes the diamond shape with 4 bases placed equidistant, 90 feet apart, though early versions vary slightly. Rule number 15, 3 outs end an inning. For the first time, the game has structure, rhythm, balance. You stand behind Cartwright as he scribbles in his notebook by lamplight, the room lit by flickering candles. He's not trying to create a national religion. He just wants to make after-work games less confusing. But that's how history often happens, isn't it? Quietly, almost accidentally. A few days later, the Knickerbockers play their first recorded game under these rules, at Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey. You walk the ferry dock with them, the city skyline glimmering across the river. The field is lush, surrounded by trees. Spectators gather, mostly curious onlookers and families with picnic baskets. The Knickerbockers face a team called the New York Nine. Spirits are high, expectations higher. The Knickerbockers wear blue wool uniforms, shirts neatly tucked, caps snug on their heads. When the game begins, something magical unfolds. The players move with purpose. The innings flow. Outs are counted cleanly. The rhythm feels right. The Knickerbockers lose that day, 23-1, according to the scorebook. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that they've turned chaos into choreography. The game, at last, has a heartbeat. Still, not everything is fixed. In those early years, the pitcher throws underhand, almost like a bowler in cricket. The ball itself is hand-sewn, irregular, often soft. Batters grip their bats differently depending on who carved them. Games are shorter, crowds smaller, but something is taking root. By the early 1850s, more clubs adopt the Knickerbocker rules. Dozens spring up across New York and Brooklyn, the Gothams, the Eagles, the Excelsiors. You walk through their practices and hear the same shouts echoing, Strike one. He's out. The language of baseball, the poetry of play, begins to coalesce. But even now, debate lingers. Some claim Cartwright invented baseball outright. Others insist he merely refined what already existed. Modern scholars lean toward the latter, arguing that baseball was already a living tradition by 1845. Cartwright just wrote it down. The uncertainty doesn't bother you. In fact, it's comforting. Baseball, like most human things, wasn't born from genius. It was shaped by countless hands. The joy of it lies not in who invented it, but in how it evolved. The quirky details of these early clubs bring the story to life. Players used to shout, "Hurrah for Old Nick," when their teammates made good plays. They'd celebrate after games with oyster suppers and cider. There were no stadiums yet, just open air, laughter, and the occasional broken window. One Knickerbocker diary entry describes a player losing his hat to a sudden gust of wind mid-swing, to the roaring amusement of the crowd. And then there were the gentlemen's codes. No swearing, no gambling, no arguing with the umpire. At least in theory. The Knickerbockers saw baseball as a moral exercise, a test of fairness and composure. It's funny to think about that now, in an age of shouting fans and million-dollar endorsements. But back then, sportsmanship mattered as much as skill. By 1856, newspapers start calling baseball the national pastime. You lean over a printing press as the words appear in black ink for the first time. It's still mostly an East Coast phenomenon, but it's spreading fast through railroads, word of mouth, and the sheer addictive joy of play. The shadow of Doubleday lingers, though, waiting decades in the wings. When the Spalding Commission finally invents its story in 1907, America will be ready to believe it. Not because it's true, but because it feels true. A single heroic inventor is easier to celebrate than a messy web of evolving traditions. But tonight, in this era of candlelight and open fields, you know the truth. Baseball isn't the brainchild of one man. It's the echo of many. 1,000 games in muddy meadows, 1,000 afternoons lost to laughter and friendly rivalry. The sun dips behind the New Jersey trees. The Knickerbockers pack their gear. Someone tosses the ball to a teammate and says, "Same field next week." It's not the first time that phrase has been spoken, and it won't be the last. You linger a while longer on the empty grass. Fireflies rise from the outfield, blinking like faint applause. Across the river, Manhattan's windows glow golden in the twilight. The myth of Doubleday will one day take root here, solid as oak. But tonight, you can feel the truth beneath your feet. The quiet hum of something far more human, stitched from time, teamwork, and the simple need to play. You stand at the edge of Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey. The air is heavy with the scent of cut grass and the metallic tang of the Hudson nearby. A group of men, bank clerks, lawyers, shopkeepers, adjust their wool caps and stretch their arms. It's 1845, and the Knickerbocker Baseball Club is about to start something they can't quite comprehend. The first official game under the first official rules. The morning sun hits the city skyline behind you. Across the river, New York hums like a restless engine, all brick and ambition. But here, on this patch of green, the world feels smaller, simpler. A man named Alexander Cartwright, meticulous and mild-mannered, holds a small leather-bound notebook. Inside are 20 rules written in neat handwriting, rules that will outlive him, rules that will echo through 1,000 stadiums and 100 million hearts. The game begins without fanfare. A few curious onlookers wander over, shielding their eyes from the glare. The batter grips a wooden bat, longer, thinner, and rougher than modern ones. The pitcher, standing just 45 feet away, tosses underhand. The ball arcs gently, the batter swings, and crack. It flies into open air. A shout goes up. The runner dashes to first, his boots pounding the dirt. You can feel the pulse of it. That electric mix of order and chaos that will define the sport forever. That's your historical fact. On June 19th, 1846, the Knickerbockers played the New York Nine under Cartwright's new rules. The New York Nine won handily, 23-1. But the score hardly matters. What matters is that for the first time, baseball feels like a system, a ritual, a story you can tell again and again. Still, even here, uncertainty lingers. Did Cartwright truly invent the diamond? Or was it just a formalization of what others were already doing? Historians still debate it. Some claim the Knickerbockers only refined an existing game called town ball. Others argue that Cartwright's genius lay in structure, codifying chaos, giving a folk game a heartbeat that could be shared. Whatever the truth, the notebook he left behind is a relic of quiet revolution. As the innings pass, you start to notice something unusual. There are no fans in bleachers, no umpires in black, no vendors shouting peanuts. Just friends playing for pride and pleasure. When an argument breaks out about whether a runner was tagged, both teams laugh and compromise. There's no league yet, no money, no fame. Just the pure, almost sacred joy of play. You wander closer to the infield. The bases are white canvas bags filled with sand. The pitcher's mound isn't really a mound, just a flat patch of dirt. The batters call each other by name, joking mid-play. It's slower than modern baseball, gentler somehow. Each hit echoes across the river like a question. What will this become? The quirky details of early baseball could fill a small library. For instance, before gloves became standard, fielders caught barehanded. That's right, barehanded. Imagine the sting of a fast grounder slapping against your palm. Players often soaked their hands in salt water or vinegar afterward to toughen the skin. And the balls? They varied wildly in size and bounce because each team made its own. If you brought a livelier ball, you might score more runs. But if you used one stuffed too tight, the game could drag for hours. That inconsistency added a charming unpredictability. You never quite knew what kind of game you were getting. Some teams even sewed tiny metal pellets into their balls to give them weight, earning the nickname bullet balls. Others preferred softer versions, called mush balls, to make the game more leisurely. Historians still argue whether the Knickerbockers used the former or the latter in that first official match. Either way, you wouldn't want to catch it barehanded. As you stroll along the outfield, a cool wind picks up from the river. You hear snippets of conversation among spectators. A woman asking her husband what inning it is. A young boy whispering that he wants to play someday. There's something communal in the air, something that feels almost American before America even knows what that means. In the evenings after practice, the Knickerbockers would gather in taverns to discuss refinements. They debated whether the pitcher should stand closer, whether a caught foul ball should count as an out, whether 3 strikes was fair. They sipped ale and laughed, unaware they were building an empire of rules. You can almost hear the scratch of pens on parchment, the murmur of argument softened by laughter. By the early 1850s, clubs start multiplying like spring weeds. The Gotham Club, the Eagle Club, the Empire Club, all playing variations of the Knickerbocker rules. Soon, Hoboken's fields are crowded every weekend. Word spreads upstate, then down to Philadelphia and Baltimore. The game is still amateur, but it's growing teeth. Friendly matches become rivalries. Uniforms appear, bright flannel shirts, sometimes with embroidered letters across the chest. Players start training seriously, bragging about batting averages and fielding speed. You step back and realize something bigger is happening. Baseball is becoming a mirror for the country itself. structured yet free, competitive yet communal, a little bit chaotic but guided by faith and fairness. In its diamond shape, you can almost see the geometry of democracy. 4 equal corners, 1 common goal. Still, some corners of the nation aren't convinced. In Boston, cricket remains the preferred gentleman's game. In rural towns, people still play mass game or town ball, refusing to switch to the New York rules. It's a patchwork of loyalties, and no one quite agrees on what's official. That ambiguity will linger until the Civil War forces unification. But that's a story for later. For now, you wander back into New York City. It's the 1850s, and baseball fever is spreading fast. Crowds gather at open lots to watch matches between local clubs. The New York Clipper begins publishing game results. Betting sneaks in, then refreshments, then, inevitably, sponsorships. The game is no longer just leisure, it's business. And yet, it's still human at its core. Players often pay for their own uniforms. They take days off from work for big matches. There are no coaches yet, just captains and shared understanding. When a man makes a bad play, his teammates don't scold him. They clap him on the back and say, "Next inning." You can almost feel the camaraderie woven into every laugh, every dusty handshake, a curious uncertainty from this era. Nobody knows who threw the first curveball. The earliest pitchers, remember, threw underhand. Tossing overhand was considered illegal, a violation of gentlemanly conduct. But slowly, pitchers began to experiment. A twist of the wrist here, a faster release there. Batters complained it was unfair, spectators gasped, and by the late 1850s, the overhand throw became too thrilling to ban. It's one of those beautiful accidents of evolution, an act of rebellion that becomes standard practice. Your shoes crunch on the dirt path as you pass behind home plate. The catcher crouches without a mask, his face exposed, eyes sharp. Every pitch is a small act of bravery. The ball slaps his bare hand, and he winces, but he doesn't flinch. Gloves won't arrive until decades later. These early players endure every bruise like a badge of honor. The quirky side of the Knickerbockers' rules shows up in how they ended games. Instead of playing 9 innings, matches were played until one team reached 21 aces, or runs. Sometimes that took an hour. Sometimes it took 5. If darkness fell, the game simply stopped. A gentleman's agreement decided the winner. In that simplicity, you can sense the heart of the game. Not the competition, but the ritual. One afternoon, you find yourself walking alongside Cartwright as he locks up the clubhouse. He's older now, his hair graying at the edges. He smiles faintly and says, "It's just a game, you know." You want to tell him that someday, his game will fill stadiums, echo on radios, and beam across satellites. But maybe it's better he doesn't know. Sometimes, the beauty of creation lies in its ignorance of destiny. By 1857, the first formal baseball convention is held in New York City. Delegates from 16 clubs meet to standardize the rules once and for all. They agree on 9 innings, 9 players, 90 feet between bases. You can hear the scratch of pens as they sign the document. The Constitution of Baseball. It's bureaucratic, perhaps, but also profound. An agreement between dreamers to give chaos a pattern. A journalist in attendance writes that the meeting felt like the birth of an institution. He's right. That same year, they formed the National Association of Baseball Players, the first organized governing body of the sport. For the first time, baseball belongs to the nation. Still, even as it becomes official, it remains fragile. The clubs are amateur, self-funded, and loosely organized. The coming storm of war will scatter them. But for now, on these fields, under a forgiving sun, the game feels eternal. You linger on the sidelines as another Knickerbocker match unfolds. The cheers rise. The ball arcs high into the air, silhouetted against a sky streaked with amber. Someone shouts, "Run!" and the runner obeys, rounding the bases like a heartbeat. This is where the myth begins to breathe. A nation about to fracture finds unity in a game about coming home. A country barely older than its grandparents discovers something worth passing down. The last light of day slides across the diamond, gilding the grass in gold. A breeze stirs your hair. You close your eyes and listen to the rhythm of it. The thud of footsteps, the pop of the ball, the laughter echoing across the Hudson. For now, baseball is still a pastime of amateurs, played for love, not money. But beneath that surface, the professional era is stirring. An age when the stakes will rise, the crowds will roar, and the game will no longer belong solely to those who play it. For the moment, though, the field is quiet again. The players shake hands, tip their hats, and wander toward the ferry as the city lights begin to flicker. Behind them, the diamond lies empty, bat and ball resting side by side in the grass like relics of a dream. And you know, somehow, that dream will soon wake the whole country. The world smells of gunpowder and sweat. The sharp crack of musket fire echoes over the fields of Virginia, and the wind carries the faint hum of a song, something simple, something familiar. It's the summer of 1863, and America is tearing itself apart. But in a clearing between regiments, a few men, gray and blue, are playing baseball. You stand beneath the shade of a twisted oak. A Union soldier crouches to pitch. A Confederate, bareheaded and barefoot, swings at the ball. The bat connects with a dull thunk, and laughter follows instead of gunfire. For a brief, impossible moment, the war disappears. This, surprisingly, is your verified historical fact. Baseball spread across the United States faster because of the Civil War. Soldiers from the North introduced the game to those from the South, playing it in camps between battles, teaching rules and swapping techniques. The National Association of Baseball Players, founded just before the war, couldn't have planned a better marketing campaign than the accidental one waged by soldiers in muddy uniforms. You walk through a camp on a humid afternoon. Smoke from cooking fires mingles with the earthy scent of damp soil. Everywhere you look, soldiers are improvising diamonds, marking bases with sticks, using stitched-up socks for balls, tree branches for bats. Some games end in shouts, others in fights, but most end in laughter. Baseball here is medicine for the mind. In Union camps near Washington, organized games draw hundreds of spectators, soldiers, nurses, local townsfolk. You can hear cheers rippling across the field like waves. Officers, usually stern and humorless, crack smiles as privates sprint between makeshift bases. Letters home speak of the games. We played baseball yesterday, and for a while forgot we were at war. You crouch beside a soldier mending his glove, a crude thing of stitched leather, more protection than precision. He tells you he used to play back in Brooklyn before the fighting started. His eyes soften when he describes the Knickerbocker-style games of his youth, the taste of beer afterward, the friendly ribbing between players. It was just fun, he says. You didn't think it'd mean anything. Then he glances toward the horizon, where the sound of distant cannons rolls like thunder, and he sighs. There's something deeply human about how the game persists amid destruction. Baseball doesn't stop for politics or bloodshed. It adapts. When soldiers are captured, they keep playing behind prison fences. When they're on the march, they carve bats from fallen branches. A game played for joy becomes a symbol of endurance, a reminder of what normal life feels like. The quirky detail here? In some camps, rival regiments formed full teams and scheduled matches like miniature leagues. The 48th New York played the 10th Massachusetts. The 16th New York challenged the 7th Michigan. Some units even issued handbills announcing games, complete with humorous rules. No bayonets on the field. Umpire's decision final, even if clearly ridiculous. You drift to another camp, somewhere near Tennessee. It's late afternoon, the air thick with gnats. A young drummer boy, too small to fight but too restless to sit still, tosses a ball high into the air and catches it again and again. His face glows in the orange light. You watch him, realizing that for this generation, baseball isn't just a pastime. It's a connection, a thread tying home to battlefield, peace to chaos. When the war ends in 1865, the soldiers carry the game back home like a souvenir. They bring it to towns that have never seen it before, to farms, cities, and schools. Suddenly, baseball is everywhere. You hear its name in saloons, in train stations, in city parks. Clubs multiply again. This time, not just in New York, but across the Midwest and down through the South. The game has become the nation's shared heartbeat, but peace brings change. The amateur spirit of the Knickerbockers begins to fade. The country, industrializing and ambitious, hungers for spectacle. By the late 1860s, the crowds swell. Matches that once drew a few dozen now pull thousands. Betting, once frowned upon, becomes commonplace. Players start being paid, quietly at first, then openly. And that's the beginning of professionalism. You wander into Cincinnati, 1869. The city is booming, factories clanging, steamboats whistling, beer flowing in rivers. On the edge of town stands a modest wooden stadium, home to the Cincinnati Red Stockings, the first fully professional baseball team in history. Every man on the roster earns a salary. For the first time, playing baseball is a job. The Red Stockings wear crisp uniforms, white knickers, scarlet socks, dark belts. Their manager, Harry Wright, is a visionary who believes baseball can be as organized as business. He drills his team with military precision, batting practice, fielding drills, team meetings. It's a new world, one where leisure becomes labor and play becomes profit. That's your second verified fact. In 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings went undefeated, 57-0, touring the nation and spreading the gospel of professional baseball. They played before record crowds, earning admiration and resentment in equal measure. For many fans, the idea of paid players felt sacrilegious, like putting a price on joy. But Wright argued that paying athletes ensured fairness and commitment. A man paid for his skill, he said, owes the crowd his best. You watch one of their games from the sidelines. The field gleams in the afternoon sun. A cheer rises as the Red Stockings star hitter, George Wright, cracks a double down the line. The crowd roars, hats waving in the air. The sound feels new, electric. A preview of the stadium roars to come. There's a tension now between nostalgia and modernity. The game is growing up, shedding innocence for ambition. Amateur clubs still exist, but they can't compete with the speed, strategy, and precision of the professionals. The national pastime has become a national enterprise, and yet, in the margins, something timeless remains. You wander through small towns along the Ohio River and see boys playing barefoot in alleys, using broomsticks for bats and stones for bases. The dream of the big leagues glimmers faintly in their eyes. The quirky charm of post-war baseball lies in its strange hybrid culture. Games might start with patriotic parades, bands playing the Star-Spangled Banner, but end with rowdy fans arguing over bets. There were no dugouts yet, no lights, no scoreboards. Players dressed on the field, shook hands with opponents, and occasionally stopped play to chase away stray dogs. In one Philadelphia match, a spectator's cow wandered into the outfield, halting play until the animal was escorted off with gentle laughter. Baseball, for all its newfound structure, remained delightfully imperfect. Historians still debate when exactly baseball became America's pastime. Some say it happened during the Civil War, when soldiers bonded over the game. Others argue it was the post-war years, when professional teams united a divided nation through shared fandom. The truth, as usual, lives somewhere between innings. You walk through a bustling city park in 1870. Vendors sell lemonade and cigars. Families spread blankets on the grass. Children chant players' names as they step up to bat. The air buzzes with a new kind of energy. Mass entertainment, civic pride. Baseball isn't just a game anymore. It's identity. Towns measure their worth by their teams. Victories become local legends. Defeats linger in gossip and print, but fame has its shadows. Scandals begin creeping in. Players accused of throwing games, umpires bribed, teams folding under financial strain. The balance between passion and profit teeters dangerously. Yet, through it all, the game endures. You find yourself one evening in St. Louis, watching a twilight match played by flickering lamplight. The crowd is small but devoted. The batter swings, connects, and the ball sails toward the river, vanishing into the dim gold horizon. The fans cheer anyway, even though nobody can see where it landed. That's the magic of this era. The belief that baseball belongs to everyone, even in darkness. The professional era continues to expand. In 1871, the National Association forms, the first professional league, complete with schedules, standings, and championship stakes. It lasts only 5 years, plagued by corruption and chaos. But it lays the groundwork for something lasting. The National League, founded in 1876. You stand in Chicago that spring, the smell of soot and sausage heavy in the air. The newly formed Chicago White Stockings take the field, led by businessman William Hulbert. The National League is his brainchild, a cleaner, stricter, more respectable version of professional baseball. Contracts, conduct codes, uniform regulations. It's the birth of the modern sports industry. But there's a paradox at play. The more professional baseball becomes, the further it drifts from its humble roots. The laughter of soldiers, the stick and rag games of children, the friendly handshakes at Elysian Fields. The sport now sells tickets and loyalty. But nostalgia lingers like a warm echo. You stroll behind home plate as the crowd chants. A vendor passes with a tray of roasted peanuts, the same scent that will someday fill century-old ballparks. The batter digs his feet into the dirt, adjusts his cap, and waits for the pitch. The pitcher winds up, still underhand, though faster now. The ball cuts through the air. Crack! The sound reverberates through the stands. The crowd rises as the runner charges toward first base, the dust blooming beneath his boots. In that single instant, all the threads of history, Egyptian ball games, English rounders, Civil War camps, and corporate dreams collide. Baseball is no longer forming. It has arrived. You watch the players shake hands as dusk settles over the city. A little boy near the rail tugs his father's sleeve and whispers, "Someday, I'm gonna play." His father smiles, pats his head, and says, "You will, and maybe he will." Because by now, baseball has become more than pastime, more than business. It's a promise, a dream passed from hand to hand, from century to century. The field empties, the lamps flicker out, and the night folds around you. Somewhere far off, a train whistles, carrying the game toward the next town, the next crowd, the next generation waiting to play. It's the 1870s now. and America hums like a freshly oiled machine. Steam engines hiss in the distance, cities glow with gaslight, and telegraph lines sing with invisible messages. The Civil War has ended. The railroads stretch like veins across the continent, and with every whistle of a departing train, baseball follows. Faster, louder, hungrier. You're standing in a tavern in St. Louis, the year 1875. The smoke is thick, the floor sticky with beer, and men are shouting over one another about baseball, not about who won, but about how much. Wagers fly across the bar. $10 says the mutuals take it, one yells. You're out of your mind. They can't pitch worth a dime, says another. On the wall hangs a tattered handbill advertising a grand match between the Chicago White Stockings and the Boston Red Stockings. Two cities, two identities, one game that's rapidly outgrowing its sandlot cradle. This is where the business begins to bloom, and where the purity begins to waver. Your verified fact. In 1871, the National Association of Professional Baseball Players was founded. It was the first professional league in history, complete with paid players, official schedules, and standings printed in newspapers. For 5 years, it brought excitement and scandal in equal measure. Teams were loosely organized, travel was chaotic, and players, often broke, were tempted by gamblers who paid them to drop easy plays or miss crucial catches. You walk through the muddy field after one such game, listening to a player mutter about his meager pay. They call us professionals, he says bitterly, but half the time, we pay to play. His hands are bruised, his uniform torn, but his eyes still gleam when he talks about the crowd's roar. They cheer like it's the war all over again, he says, half laughing. Only this time, everyone wins. The early professional players were working-class heroes, tough, restless men chasing glory in an age that rarely offered it. They rode trains for days, slept in cheap inns, played doubleheaders on dusty fields, and still found energy to argue about rules in smoky hotel lobbies. You can almost smell the ink of the newspapers that covered their exploits, full of nicknames like Big Dan, Curly, and the Massachusetts Meteor. But corruption spread like mold in a damp cellar. Without central oversight, games were easily fixed. Spectators whispered about suspicious errors and sudden collapses. And so, in 1876, a group of owners met in a Chicago hotel and made a decision that would change everything. They formed the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs, a new organization built on discipline, contracts, and integrity. Each club was required to sign players formally, honor schedules, and most importantly, expel anyone caught cheating or drunk on the field. William Hulbert, the iron-willed Chicago businessman behind the plan, said it plainly: "We must make baseball a business, or it will die as a pastime." The new league begins with 8 teams: Boston, Chicago, Cincinnati, Hartford, Louisville, New York, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. You stand in the stands on opening day, April 22, 1876, as the crowd of 5,000 hums with anticipation. The crack of the bat feels sharper, cleaner. The air smells of cigar smoke and roasted peanuts. You can feel the change, like the earth shifting underfoot. Baseball isn't just a pastime anymore, it's a product. The first National League champions, the Chicago White Stockings, led by the fiery manager Cap Anson, a name that will echo for decades. He's one of the sport's first true stars, a skilled hitter, a fierce competitor, and sadly, a man whose legacy is as much about exclusion as excellence. Anson would later play a key role in enforcing the unwritten color line, refusing to play against black athletes. It's a dark thread in an otherwise gleaming tapestry, a reminder that even the purest games can be tainted by their times. But we'll return to that shadow later. For now, in the late 1870s, baseball explodes like a summer storm. Crowds pack into wooden grandstands, women in parasols and men in vests. Bands play brass tunes between innings. Newspapers run play-by-plays. Reporters debate whether curveballs are a trick or a science. Here's another quirky fact. When pitchers first began throwing curveballs, many fans, and even some players, believed it was an illusion. "You can't bend a ball in the air," they scoffed. In one famous demonstration, pitcher Fred Goldsmith stood before a crowd at Chicago's fairgrounds and threw a curve in public to prove it could be done. The ball arced like a whisper through the wind, curving past a post. The crowd gasped. Baseball had entered the age of physics. You follow the sport's expansion through the booming cities of the Gilded Age. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. Railroads make travel easier. Telegraphs carry scores faster. Baseball becomes America's first national obsession, bridging the gap between the rural and the urban, the rich and the working class. But every rise brings its rival. By 1882, the American Association is born. Cheaper tickets, Sunday games, beer sold at the park. It markets itself as baseball for the people, thumbing its nose at the National League's stuffy respectability. Fans love it. The press calls it the Beer and Whiskey League, half mocking, half adoring. You're sitting in the stands at an American Association game. The atmosphere is raucous, more carnival than competition. Vendors hawk lager by the pint. Children chase foul balls through the aisles. A player slides into home, covering himself in mud, and the umpire, wearing a stovepipe hat, calls him safe. The crowd erupts. It's loud, messy, glorious. For a while, the two leagues coexist in a shaky balance. The National League representing tradition and order. The American Association embodying working-class rebellion. Their rivalry creates tension, but also innovation. Doubleheaders become common. Ticket prices drop. Players gain leverage as both leagues fight to sign talent. Then comes the first great baseball rebellion, the Players' League of 1890. Frustrated by owners who treat them like property, players form their own league, demanding fair contracts and a share of profits. It's a bold, noble idea, and a financial disaster. After one season, it collapses. The players crawl back to the owners, poorer but prouder, and baseball learns its first bitter lesson about labor and capital. You stand outside a ballpark one cold autumn evening as a small group of fans reads the headline, "Players' League dissolved." The wind flutters the paper. A man mutters, "Guess the bosses always win." He spits into the dirt and walks away. Still, the 1880s and 1890s are golden in their own rough-hewn way. The fields are muddy, the bats splinter easily, and the gloves are still little more than padded mittens. But the players, Anson, King Kelly, Buck Ewing, become household names. Crowds of 10,000 gather to see them. You can almost hear the calls echoing through time. Batter up. Steerike 2. He's out of there. The rhythm of the game, perfected through decades of improvisation, now beats in perfect time with the heart of a growing nation. Baseball, by now, is the country's mirror. It reflects everything: ambition, greed, innovation, and inequality. It's both a business and a belief. The grandstands fill with factory workers and bankers alike, shouting in the same breath, their differences dissolving with each inning. You linger after a game in Boston, watching the grounds crew smooth the dirt around home plate. A little boy sneaks onto the field, kneels, and presses his hand into the base path, as if touching sacred soil. He looks up at his father in the stands and grins. "It's lucky," he says. His father smiles, but doesn't correct him. Maybe he's right. By the time the century turns, baseball is unstoppable. It has weathered scandals, rivalries, and rebellion. It's on the verge of its next great transformation, one of legends and lights, of dead balls and towering home runs. But before the century closes, one more uncertainty lingers in the air. Who really owns baseball? The players, the fans, or the men in suits who count the coins? Historians still debate it, but perhaps the answer is simpler. The game belongs to whoever loves it most deeply, whoever keeps playing long after the sun goes down. You step out of the ballpark into the chill of night. The lamps flicker. The streets hum with music and laughter. Somewhere in the distance, a telegraph clicks out the final score. Boston 5, Chicago 3. And across the continent, from New York to San Francisco, millions of people pause for a moment, smiling, nodding, or sighing, as if they've all just shared the same heartbeat. The nation may argue, rebuild, and reinvent itself 1,000 times over. But when the crack of a bat splits the air, everyone understands. The game is alive. You wake beneath the smell of leather and dust. The year has turned to 1900. The country is loud with factories and optimism. And baseball, still young, still learning how to breathe in this new century, is about to grow into something far larger than its founders ever imagined. The field before you is rough, uneven, but bright with morning light. The pitcher scuffs the dirt with his boot, his hand wrapped around a ball that feels heavier than it looks. He spits, winds up, and hurls it. Not overhand yet, but fast and low, a blur that thuds into the catcher's bare glove. The sound rings out across the park like a gunshot. The crowd flinches, then cheers. This is the beginning of what later historians will call the dead ball era. A strange and beautiful time between 1900 and 1919, when runs were scarce. Pitchers ruled the field, and the air itself seemed thicker, too heavy for the ball to fly far. Your verified historical fact. During these 2 decades, home runs were rare not because players lacked power, but because the balls themselves were soft. Each game used only a handful, often darkened with mud and tobacco juice, until they resembled river stones. By the 9th inning, a batter could barely see the seams. The average final score, 2-1, maybe 3-2. A single run felt like a symphony. You lean on the fence and watch strategy replace spectacle. Every bunt matters. Every stolen base draws a gasp. Managers signal from the dugout like generals plotting invisible wars, touching their caps, scratching their sleeves, winking at runners poised to dash. Small ball, they call it. Win with precision, not power. Across the diamond, a wiry man in a gray uniform digs his cleats into the base path. That's Ty Cobb. Sharp-tongued, ferocious, hated, and worshipped in equal measure. He slides into bases like a blade, spikes flashing. The newspapers paint him as a villain, but on the field he's unstoppable. In 1911, he bats .420, a record that still hums like a ghost in the stat books. You smell dust, hear curses, feel the vibration of wooden bats that shatter in cold April air. Baseball has become a grinder of bodies and tempers, a working-class theater where elegance and brutality share the same bench. There's a quirk that defines this period. Every ball stays in play until it literally unravels. Fans are expected to throw fouls back onto the field. The idea of souvenir balls doesn't exist yet. When one disappears into the stands, the umpire halts the game until it's returned. The crowd boos the thief, and sometimes volunteers tackle him before he can escape. Still, innovation brews beneath the grime. Pitchers like Christy Mathewson and Walter Johnson invent a new vocabulary of motion: fadeaway, spitball, shine ball. Mathewson, clean-cut and college-educated, becomes the sport's first gentleman star. Proof that baseball isn't only for roughnecks. Walter Johnson's fastball, they say, comes out of the shadows before you hear the wind. And yet, amid the glory, uncertainty coils. No one knows exactly how much tampering goes on with those doctored balls. Some pitchers rub them with paraffin or soap. Others scuff one side with sandpaper hidden in their gloves. The league pretends not to notice. The fans, half suspicious, half enthralled, cheer anyway. You sit in the grandstand one chilly afternoon, the crowd bundled in wool coats. Vendors weave through the aisles selling roasted peanuts for a nickel. Children wave tiny scorecards, scribbling notes in pencil. The air vibrates with hope and habit. When the batter connects, a rare long fly, the entire park rises as one. The ball climbs, stalls, and dies 20 feet short of the fence. The sigh that follows feels almost sacred. Between innings, a band plays ragtime. Couples dance on the wooden walkways. Baseball isn't merely a sport now, it's an event, a ritual for cities hungry for leisure. Every Monday, newspapers print columns longer than sermons. Every boy with a stick imagines himself on those dusty diamonds. You wander through the league's underbelly, half-finished stadiums, cramped locker rooms that smell of liniment and pipe smoke. Players sit on benches carved from pine, joking through exhaustion. They earn little, barely enough for rent. But their names travel by telegraph across the continent. Then, in 1903, something grand happens. For the first time, the champions of the National League and the newly formed American League face each other in a best-of-9 series. Boston versus Pittsburgh. The newspapers call it the World Series. It sounds boastful, but no one minds. The Americans win 5-3, and the concept sticks. That's your second verified fact tonight. 1903 marks the birth of the World Series, the annual ceremony that will one day define Octobers. The quirky side? In those early years, players had to buy their own train tickets to away games, reimbursed only if they won. More than once, losing teams walked home, broke but smiling. As the decade rolls on, ballparks rise like cathedrals. Shea Park in Philadelphia, Forbes Field in Pittsburgh, Comiskey Park in Chicago. Brick, steel, and dreams. The wooden grandstands of the 19th century burned down too often. These new ones promise permanence. You walk their corridors, hearing footsteps echo against concrete, smelling hot dogs and cigar smoke. There's a magic in those crowds. Factory workers sitting beside bankers, immigrants beside aristocrats, all shouting at the same pitch. For a few hours, hierarchy dissolves in dust and sunlight, but the shadows are lengthening. The balls are dark, the game's long, the score's low. Fans crave fireworks, something brighter than endless bunts and double steals. They'll get it soon, though not before baseball suffers its first heartbreak. You move forward to 1919. The war has ended. Soldiers return home, and the nation exhales, desperate for distraction. Chicago's Comiskey Park gleams under September skies as the White Sox prepare to face the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series. 8 men take the field, their uniforms spotless, their hearts divided. Historians still argue about what truly happened. But here's what's known. Gamblers approach several White Sox players, promising money to throw the series. Whether out of greed, resentment toward their miserly owner, or sheer fatigue, some agreed. The Reds won, the bets were paid, and whispers began to coil through every tavern in America. When the truth emerged, it cracked the country's faith. Headlines screamed, "Baseball fixed." The accused players, including shoeless Joe Jackson, beloved and bewildered, were banned for life. The game survived, but its innocence didn't. You stand in the empty stadium weeks later. The seats are cold, the field bare. A discarded program flutters against the fence. Somewhere, you can still hear the echo of the crowd that once believed every hit was honest. To heal itself, baseball appoints its first commissioner, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, a man whose very name sounds carved from stone. His first act is decisive: lifetime bans for the conspirators. His second is symbolic. He vows to restore the soul of baseball. The dead ball era ends here, not just because of scandal, but because of change. New manufacturing processes produce livelier balls. Stadiums grow wider, bats lighter. Fans, weary of whispers, want joy again. They crave heroes, spectacle, redemption. And as if history itself takes pity, one arrives. A young left-handed pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, strong, loud, hungry, starts hitting the ball farther than anyone thought possible. His name is George Herman Ruth, but the world will know him as Babe. You can almost hear the future approaching in the crack of his bat. The gasp of the crowd, the sudden possibility that the ball might soar and keep soaring, leaving the dead age behind. The century is about to roar. You can hear him before you see him. The low murmur of the crowd thickens. The voices ripple outward from the field like wind through grass. A boy tugs his father's sleeve, eyes wide, whispering, "Is that him?" And it is. The man striding from the dugout looks almost too large for the game that birthed him. His uniform, white as sunlight, seems to gleam on its own. He grins, a boyish, reckless grin, and taps the barrel of his bat against his cleats twice. The year is 1920, and Babe Ruth is about to change baseball forever. You stand behind home plate as he adjusts his stance. He's still new to this side of the sport. Until recently, he was a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, good enough to win 94 games in 6 seasons. But his real power isn't in throwing. It's in the swing. That wide, looping, joyful swing that seems to connect not just with the ball, but with America itself. The pitcher winds up. The ball hisses forward. Crack. The sound is sharper than anything you've heard. A thunderclap wrapped in sunlight. The ball climbs higher, higher, until it vanishes into the crowd beyond the outfield wall. There's a half-second of silence. Then an eruption. Cheers so loud the wooden stands tremble beneath your feet. People leap, hats fly, strangers hug. Somewhere in the din, a newspaper boy is already rehearsing tomorrow's headline. You can almost feel the moment history tilts. Baseball has crossed from precision to spectacle. That's your verified fact. In 1920, Babe Ruth hit 54 home runs, more than any other team in the American League. He turned a pitcher's game into a hitter's stage. Stadiums were redesigned, fences pulled back, bleachers extended. The home run became the heartbeat of the sport, and Ruth its demigod. You follow him through the decade like a comet. Every city he visits becomes a carnival. Kids skip school, office clerks sneak from work, and photographers swarm the ballpark gates. He eats too much, jokes too loudly, and drinks more than the moralists approve. But none of it matters. When he steps to the plate, all sins are forgiven. The ball flies, and America forgets its worries for a few seconds. There's a sweetness to the spectacle. The country has survived war, scandal, and influenza. Now it wants joy, and Ruth provides it. He's a larger-than-life man in a hopeful age, a bridge between the working class that raised him and the roaring world of jazz, automobiles, and radio. He makes baseball loud again. The quirky side of the story? The Yankees, eager to house the throngs who come to see him, build a new stadium in 1923. Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built. On opening day, Ruth homers, of course, as if the universe itself cues him on time. The ball arcs against the sky, and someone in the stands swears it disappears into the sun. But even the golden years have their shadows. In 1920, just months after Ruth's arrival in New York, tragedy strikes. Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman is hit in the head by a pitch and dies the next day. The only player ever killed during a major league game. The ball that struck him was dark, scuffed, almost invisible against the evening sky. His death forces a long overdue change. Umpires begin replacing dirty balls with clean ones during play, and pitchers lose the right to doctor their grips. The game brightens, literally and metaphorically. You can see it now. White balls glinting against blue summer skies, grandstands overflowing, vendors shouting, brass bands playing between innings. Baseball has found its light again, and the nation, roaring into the jazz age, mirrors its mood. Radios crackle with play-by-play broadcasts, bringing the crack of the bat into kitchens and barbershops. For the first time, fans can hear the game in real time. Somewhere in rural Kansas, a boy closes his eyes and imagines Yankee Stadium. He's never seen it, but he knows its sound. The hum before a pitch, the eruption after a hit. The static hum of a crowd too big to picture. You wander through the decade, watching heroes rise. Lou Gehrig, the quiet powerhouse. Rogers Hornsby, cold and methodical. Lefty Grove, fierce as lightning. The stats pile up like scripture, batting averages, slugging percentages, earned run averages. And baseball begins to speak a new language of numbers, half mathematics, half myth. But beneath the glory, uncertainty hums. The economy, stretched by speculation, wobbles. By the decade's end, the roaring 20s stumble into silence. Banks close, factories go dark, and the crowds thin. Stadiums still stand, but seats empty. In 1932, attendance drops by half. You walk through Yankee Stadium one gray afternoon and hear your own footsteps echo in the stands. Even Babe Ruth looks tired. And yet, baseball endures. In hard times, people cling to small joys. A nickel for a bleacher seat, a few hours of escape. It's here, in the Depression years, that baseball becomes more than entertainment. It becomes therapy. One chilly April day, you find yourself in Chicago's Wrigley Field, watching a young slugger named Hack Wilson swing with a kind of desperation only hunger can teach. In 1930, he hits 56 home runs and drives in 191 runs, still a record. When asked how he did it, he shrugs and says, "I just didn't want to go home hungry." Across the country, teams innovate to survive. Owners introduce night games to attract more fans, though purists grumble that baseball belongs to the daylight. You stand under the first floodlights in 1935 as the Cincinnati Reds host the Philadelphia Phillies. The lights hum softly, moths swirling around them. The field glows like a stage, every blade of grass etched in silver. The players look smaller somehow, the world around them darker. But the game shines bright enough to chase the shadows. The quirky fact of the era. In the 1930s, some teams experimented with colored baseballs, orange and yellow, so fans could see better under new lights. They never caught on, but for a while, the field shimmered with flashes of tangerine. By now, the game's stars are gods. You meet them in your travels. Dizzy Dean, cocky and brilliant, calling his own strikeouts before throwing them. Jimmy Fox, broad as a doorframe, whose bat sounds like thunder. And the immortal Lou Gehrig, who plays every day without fail until illness steals his strength. You're there on July 4th, 1939, when Gehrig stands at Yankee Stadium, his voice trembling but clear. "Today," he says, "I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." The crowd weeps quietly, hats pressed to hearts. Baseball, once just a game, has become a vessel for grace. Then comes the 1940s, and once again, the world breaks. The war sweeps across oceans and continents, and baseball, like every corner of life, changes with it. Stars enlist, stadiums grow quiet. Ted Williams trades his bat for a fighter plane. Bob Feller, a pitcher for Cleveland, leaves his first $1 million contract to serve in the Navy the very next day after Pearl Harbor. You find yourself in a dim barracks in the Pacific, where soldiers huddle around a radio, listening to a World Series broadcast piped through static. When the crowd in St. Louis cheers, the men here cheer too. For a moment, the distance between home and war vanishes. There's a funny, fragile irony. The sport that once united a divided country during the Civil War now comforts soldiers fighting for the world. Baseball becomes a promise whispered across oceans. When this ends, we'll play again. On American soil, women step into the diamond's void. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League begins in 1943, filling stadiums with players in skirts who slide and hit and throw just as hard as the men. You stand near third base as Dorothy Kamenschek stretches for a line drive, her gloves snapping shut with perfect timing. The crowd roars. Newspapers mock them at first. Baseball in lipstick. But soon, print box scores with pride. That's another verified fact. The league ran for 12 seasons, drawing more than 1 million fans in its prime. It proved something simple and revolutionary: that baseball's heart doesn't care about gender. You walk the empty fields after one such game, the sun setting behind the bleachers. The chalk lines fade, but the sound lingers. The murmur of the crowd, the laughter of teammates, the slow, steady rhythm of footsteps heading home. As the war ends, soldiers return, bringing baseball back with them. Scarred, older, but grateful. In their absence, the game hasn't weakened. It has deepened. Its roots run through factories, fields, and foxholes alike. You take one last look at Yankee Stadium before moving on. The stands are full again, the lights burn bright, and a new generation of fans is shouting itself hoarse. Somewhere in the stands, a boy balances a radio on his knee, listening to a voice that sounds like forever. Here's the pitch. And there it goes. You close your eyes. The ball soars, the crowd erupts, and for a heartbeat you can feel it. That pulse that began in ancient fields will never quite fade. The age of Ruth and Gehrig is ending. The world is rebuilding. But baseball, eternal as memory, stands ready for its next swing. You open your eyes to the warm hum of summer, 1946. The war is over. The world exhales for the first time in years. Factories roar back to life, families reunite, and stadiums across America burst with people hungry for sunlight and noise. You can smell popcorn, cigars, and fresh-cut grass. You can feel the old rhythm returning. But there's something different in the air now. Something waiting to be born. The field stretches before you like a dream stitched in green. The players loosen their shoulders, spit into gloves, grin at the crowd. Baseball has survived depression and war, and it stands now as a kind of church, an open-air faith where anyone can believe for a few hours that life makes sense. And yet, the congregation isn't complete, because even as the crowd roars, 1,000 seats in every stadium remain invisible. Seats no black fan can buy, no black player can fill. You walk beyond the manicured grass to a dusty field in Kansas City. The uniforms here are faded, the bats splintered, the gloves worn thin. But the play is poetry. A batter named Josh Gibson drives the ball so far it disappears into twilight. A base runner named Cool Papa Bell rounds second before the outfielder even fields the ball. They laugh, they taunt, they play for love and survival, for crowds that pack into small bleachers under dim lights. This is the Negro Leagues, where legends are made in the shadows. Here's your historical fact. From the 1920s through the 1940s, The Negro National League and its successors produced some of the greatest players the world had ever seen. Gibson, Bell, Satchel Paige, Oscar Charleston, Buck Leonard, and countless others. They played doubleheaders in the heat, traveled in broken-down buses, slept in segregated hotels, and still drew millions of fans. You sit in those stands now, fanning yourself with a folded newspaper. The crowd around you is alive, dressed in Sunday best, shouting every play with the energy of a full orchestra. A band in the corner bursts into jazz between innings. The rhythm of the game and the rhythm of the horn section weave together like conversation. You feel it. Baseball here isn't just sport, it's defiance. Satchel Paige stands on the mound, tall, thin, grinning like he knows a secret. He toys with the batter, quick pitch, slow pitch, hesitation, delivery. The crowd howls with laughter and awe. "Don't look back," Paige once said. "Something might be gaining on you." When he finally retires the side, he tips his cap like a showman leaving the stage. The quirky truth. Many of the players kept their own statistics because white newspapers refused to print them. Paige sometimes claimed he won 2,000 games. Historians say no one really knows. Okay, maybe that's better. The uncertainty itself feels like legend. As you travel from Kansas City to Pittsburgh to Birmingham, the story repeats. Fields carved from clay, stands packed shoulder to shoulder, the sound of hope disguised as laughter. You feel the heartbeat of a community too strong to vanish, too proud to wait forever. And then, in 1947, the waiting ends. You find yourself in Brooklyn, standing near the third base line at Ebbets Field. The sky is clear, the crowd restless. Vendors hawk peanuts, kids wave pennants. And in the dugout, a young man sits quietly, staring at his shoes. His uniform is clean, his expression unreadable. His name is Jackie Robinson, and in a few moments, he will step onto this field and change America. The Dodgers take the field, the announcer's voice trembling with history. When Robinson jogs to first base, a ripple runs through the crowd. Applause mixed with jeers, cheers tangled with hate. You can feel the weight pressing down on him, a century of exclusion balanced on his shoulders. The pitcher glares. The ball comes fast. Robinson swings, fouls, adjusts. He breathes deep. The next pitch comes, he connects. A clean, bright crack that cuts through the noise. The crowd hesitates, then erupts. He sprints, slides, dust rising behind him like smoke. Safe. The game continues, but the world has shifted. That's your next verified fact. On April 15th, 1947, Jackie Robinson became the first black player to break Major League Baseball's color line. He endured hatred, slurs, and isolation with a calm fierceness that became its own weapon. By the end of the season, he was Rookie of the Year. But the uncertain truth lies beneath the headlines. Robinson wasn't alone. Dozens of black players paved the way before him, ignored, forgotten, erased. And it was Branch Rickey, the Dodgers' general manager, who finally forced the gate open, not out of charity, but conviction. "We had to be right," Rickey said later. There was no room for error. You stand in that moment, hearing the roar swell into something greater than sport. For every insult hurled from the stands, there are 10 voices shouting in celebration. The sound isn't polite, it's raw and electric, the noise of a country redefining itself inning by inning. The next few years bloom with new heroes. Larry Doby joins the Cleveland Indians, the first black player in the American League. Satchel Paige finally pitches under Major League lights at age 42, still dazzling hitters half his age. The Negro Leagues begin to fade, not from failure but fulfillment. Their best players are being called up, their stories finally shared. You walk through a Negro League clubhouse one last time. The lockers are empty, the uniforms folded neatly. A single bat leans against the wall, its handle worn smooth. It's bittersweet. The closing of one chapter so another can thrive. The quirky detail of this era? When Robinson traveled with the Dodgers, some hotels refused him entry. His teammates, white and black, often walked out in protest, choosing to sleep on the team bus. It wasn't about politics, one of them said years later. It was about respect. By the early 1950s, the integration of baseball is unstoppable. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, names that will carve themselves into history, begin their rise. The crowds grow again, more diverse, more unified. Baseball, once a reflection of division, becomes a stage for something closer to justice. You stand in the stands during a 1954 Giants-Dodgers game. The sun burns high, the air smells of salt and soda. Willie Mays drifts into center field, glove open, eyes locked on the sky. The ball arcs high, too high. It should drop beyond reach. But Mays turns, sprints, never looks back. At the last moment, he twists and catches it over his shoulder, smooth as a heartbeat. The stadium gasps, then erupts. Even the opposing players applaud. It's called the catch, and it's your last historical fact for tonight's chapter. You linger as the crowd leaves, the stands emptying into golden afternoon. Somewhere, Jackie Robinson sits in a dugout, his hands folded, his face calm. He doesn't smile often anymore, but there's satisfaction there. A quiet pride in knowing the game, and maybe the nation, will never be the same again. As you walk from the field, you realize how far the game has come. From muddy meadows and bare hands to floodlit stadiums filled with every color of humanity. It's still imperfect, still arguing with itself. But it's alive in a way few things are. Behind you, the groundskeeper sweeps the infield, the bristles tracing small arcs in the dirt. The air smells faintly of rain. Somewhere above the lights, a plane cuts across the sky, its trail gleaming like chalk on a board. For the first time in generations, baseball's story isn't about who can play. It's about what they'll do next. And as the field fades behind you, the cheers echo softly in the wind, mingling with a promise that began in dust centuries ago. Play on. The crowd has changed again. You can hear it before you see it. Radios buzzing, car horns echoing outside the ballpark, 1,000 conversations blending into a single pulse of anticipation. It's 1955, a hot Brooklyn summer, and the Dodgers are about to do what Brooklyn has been waiting for all its life: win it all. You find yourself in the bleachers at Ebbets Field, the afternoon light filtering through cigarette smoke. The stands are packed shoulder to shoulder. Factory workers, mothers with babies, kids waving cheap pennants. The air vibrates with something between faith and disbelief. Down on the field, Jackie Robinson crouches at third. Roy Campanella adjusts his catcher's mask, and Duke Snider shades his eyes in center field. Opposite them, the Yankees, always the Yankees, look like marble statues, confident and polished. The Dodgers have been here before. They've lost here before. But this year feels different. The pitch comes. The crack splits the air, and the crowd leaps as one. You can feel the stands tremble beneath your feet. The Dodgers win Game 7 of the World Series, beating the mighty Yankees at last. Brooklyn explodes, cheers, confetti, strangers dancing in the streets. For one delirious night, an entire borough believes the universe makes sense. That's your verified fact. In 1955, the Brooklyn Dodgers won their first and only World Series championship before moving to Los Angeles just 2 years later. But the victory is bittersweet. Within seasons, Ebbets Field will be gone, the team will be gone, and the neighborhood will lose the heartbeat that held it together. It's a pattern that repeats across America in the coming years. Cities changing, industries shifting, the game following the money westward like the sun itself. You sit for a moment in the empty stands long after the crowd has gone. Peanut shells crunch beneath your boots. The scoreboard flickers. You can almost hear the ghosts of cheers fading into silence. Then, somewhere behind you, a transistor radio crackles to life. Elvis Presley singing, "That's All Right." The world is changing its tune, and baseball, ever the mirror, begins to change too. The 1950s give way to the 1960s with a sense of expansion, both literal and figurative. In 1958, the Dodgers arrive in Los Angeles, and the Giants follow them west to San Francisco. The first major league games on the Pacific Coast draw hundreds of thousands, crowds dazzled by the idea that baseball can now stretch from sea to shining sea. The new stadiums smell like palm trees and hot asphalt, the air dry and glittering. But even as the game spreads, the innocence of earlier decades grows harder to hold. The 1960s are restless years. Civil rights marches, Vietnam, new music, new politics, and baseball feels the tremors. Some fans call it distraction, others call it salvation. You find yourself in San Francisco on a cool evening in 1961, watching Willie Mays patrol the outfield like a panther. He's grace and power made flesh, every movement precise, effortless. When he connects with a pitch, it's not a swing, it's a symphony. The ball leaves the park, soaring over the bleachers, disappearing into night. You realize that for millions, this is still church. No matter what's burning outside, the diamond remains a sanctuary. And yet, the decade doesn't belong to Mays alone. Across the country, another story unfolds. In New York, a lanky Yankee named Roger Maris stands on the brink of immortality. 60 years have passed since Babe Ruth set his record of 60 home runs. And now, in 1961, Maris is chasing it. Every swing brings cheers and boos, admiration and anxiety. The press hounds him, the crowds chant Ruth's name. "You can't beat a ghost," a sports writer sighs. But on October 1st, Maris does just that. Home run number 61, a white blur into the right field stands. The crowd erupts, but the joy feels complicated, almost guilty, as though the world has cheated on the Babe. That's another historical fact. Roger Maris hit 61 home runs in 1961, breaking Ruth's seemingly unbreakable record. For years, an asterisk followed it in the record books, as if greatness itself required permission. You wander through that era's contradictions, youthful optimism clashing with deep unrest. Baseball, too, is caught between nostalgia and evolution. Stadiums sprout domes and artificial turf. Expansion teams appear in Houston, in Montreal, in San Diego. The sound of the game changes. No longer the dusty crack of wood on worn grass, but the metallic echo of ball meeting plastic in enclosed, climate-controlled air. The quirky side? When the Houston Astrodome opened in 1965, the first indoor stadium in history, players complained they couldn't see the ball against the roof's glare. So the team painted the ceiling and replaced the grass with a synthetic surface, soon nicknamed AstroTurf. The future, it seemed, had arrived, but nostalgia never dies easily. Somewhere in the Midwest, a farmer listens to games on a crackling AM radio. The voice of broadcaster Harry Carey narrating every pitch with the zeal of a preacher. Families gather around living room televisions, their faces flickering blue in the glow of evening baseball. The sport still belongs to the people, even as the money grows larger and the players more distant. Then, in the summer of 1968, a year of riots, assassinations, and war, baseball pauses to remember its stillness. Pitchers dominate so completely that fans call it the year of the pitcher. Bob Gibson finishes with an impossibly low earned run average of 1.12. Denny McLain wins 31 games. Offense vanishes, and the league quietly lowers the pitcher's mound the following year, a small act of mercy to restore balance. You stand on a quiet field as the decade closes. The scoreboard fades, the air heavy with dust and change. The civil rights movement has altered the country's soul, but prejudice lingers. The Vietnam War rages overseas, dividing homes and hearts. In that tension, baseball becomes both an escape and a reminder of what endures. The same diamond, the same rules, the same shared silence before the next pitch. The 1970s dawn in color. Televisions beam games into living rooms in vivid hues for the first time. The uniforms get louder, bright yellows, deep blues, stripes that shimmer in sunlight. You see players like Reggie Jackson striding to the plate, swagger radiating, sunglasses reflecting the crowd. This isn't the stoic era of Gehrig anymore. This is performance, charisma, confidence. And somewhere in Cincinnati, a red blur named Pete Rose sprints to first base on a walk. On a walk. He plays like the field owes him money. They call him Charlie Hustle. And for a time, he embodies the modern game. Relentless, brilliant, flawed. The verified fact. In 1975, Rose's Cincinnati Reds, the Big Red Machine, win the World Series, capping one of the most dominant dynasties in history. Baseball's balance has shifted from careful bunts to power and speed, a blend of precision and chaos that suits the new decade perfectly. You sit in the stands that autumn, listening to Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody leak from a nearby radio, watching the fireworks bloom over Riverfront Stadium. The lights flicker against your face. You can feel it. The pulse of the crowd, the rhythm of the game. The old magic surviving even as everything else changes. But the 1970s bring more than color and spectacle. They bring freedom. In 1975, pitcher Curt Flood's long legal battle finally bears fruit, and players win the right to free agency. For the first time, they can choose where to play and what to earn. It's a revolution that shifts power from owners to athletes, transforming baseball into the multi-million-dollar stage it is today. You can almost hear the unease in the stands. Some fans grumble that the game's soul is being sold. Others celebrate the fairness long overdue. Either way, baseball, like the country that raised it, is growing up, messily, irreversibly. As the decade fades, disco bleeds from stadium speakers, mustaches thicken, and stadiums swell with new teams, new faces, new promises. The crowd still roars. The ball still arcs through the same endless sky. The game remains simple, even as life grows complicated. You stay until the lights dim and the field empties. Somewhere, a broom sweeps peanut shells into piles, and a lone groundskeeper hums an old tune under his breath. The night hums with neon and radio. It's 1981 now. Post-Vietnam, mid-Reagan, shoulder pads and synthesizers. And baseball is learning how to survive in a decade that runs on cable TV and caffeine. You stand beneath the bright, almost artificial glow of a stadium that feels more like a stage than a park. Everything shines. The turf, the uniforms, even the players' teeth. The smell of popcorn still hangs in the air. But now there's something else. Money. Television cameras orbit the diamond like satellites, and every movement is framed, replayed, sold. The game that once lived in neighborhood parks now beams into millions of living rooms. You can hear the echo of the announcer bouncing from one screen to the next. Welcome to Monday Night Baseball. This is the modern machine. And like any machine, it rattles when it moves too fast. Your verified fact. In 1981, Major League Baseball endured its first mid-season strike. Players demanded a fairer share of revenue, Owners dug in. For nearly 2 months, the fields fell silent. No cheering crowds, no seventh-inning stretch, just dust gathering on the bases. Fans felt betrayed. Newspapers printed obituaries for summer itself. When the league finally returned, something fundamental had shifted. Baseball was no longer just a pastime. It was an industry, and everyone knew it. You walked through an empty stadium during that strike. The scoreboard is dark, the seats ghostly in moonlight. A lone bat leans against the dugout wall like a forgotten tool. You can almost hear the echoes of children asking, when do they play again? But when they do return, they bring fireworks. You find yourself in Los Angeles, 1988. The Dodgers are underdogs in the World Series against the mighty Oakland A's. It's Game 1, bottom of the 9th, 2 outs. A man limps from the tunnel. Kirk Gibson, injured, barely able to stand. The pitcher, Dennis Eckersley, winds up. The count runs full. Gibson swings. Crack. The ball arcs into the right field bleachers, a perfect, impossible flight. He hobbles around the bases, pumping his fist, pain erased by ecstasy. The crowd becomes thunder. That's the fact. But the meaning is bigger. Gibson's home run becomes a national parable, a reminder that even in an era of money and marketing, baseball can still produce miracles. Through the 80s, miracles and controversies dance side by side. Cal Ripken Jr. begins the streak that will make him the Iron Man. Fernando Valenzuela, a chubby-cheeked Mexican pitcher with a screwball no one can read, ignites Fernando Mania, filling Dodger Stadium with Latino fans who finally see themselves on the mound. Across the league, speed and swagger return. Ricky Henderson stealing bases like a thief in daylight. Ozzie Smith backflipping onto the field as if baseball were ballet. The quirky truth of the decade? Some teams experimented with polyester uniforms so shiny they blinded infielders under stadium lights. Players called them saunas with sleeves. The fans, though, loved the color. Powder blue Royals, canary yellow Pirates, rainbow striped Astros. The sport that once lived in sepia now gleams in Technicolor. You travel through the 1990s, and the sound of the game shifts again. The crack of the bat echoes through retractable roof stadiums. Electronic scoreboards flash animations of exploding baseballs. Kids collect trading cards like currency. You can almost smell the gloss of the cardboard packs, the gum that tastes of ink and sugar. But beneath the candy coating, a storm brews. In 1994, the players strike again, this time canceling the World Series entirely. For the first time in 90 years, no champion is crowned. Fans feel betrayed all over again. You walk past shuttered ticket booths and see, "Sorry, no game today," taped to the glass. The silence feels heavier this time. Even the pigeons seem confused. And then, slowly, the game saves itself the way it always has, through wonder. You're standing in St. Louis in 1998, the air thick with summer and suspense. Mark McGwire steps to the plate, muscles coiled. Across the country, Sammy Sosa keeps pace. Both men are chasing a ghost, Roger Maris's record of 61 home runs. Every at-bat feels like a drum roll. When McGwire finally connects for number 62, the crowd doesn't just cheer, they roar with relief, forgiveness, awe. For a moment, baseball feels young again. That's the historical fact. The uncertain footnote comes later. Years later, whispers of performance-enhancing drugs will shadow those numbers, turning awe into ambivalence. Historians will argue whether to celebrate or condemn. But standing here, in that instant, you can only feel the vibration of joy. The same ancient cheer that's been echoing since Cartwright's dusty fields. The decade rolls forward in flashes. Derek Jeter's calm eyes under Yankee Stadium lights, Ken Griffey Jr.'s perfect left-handed swing looping through air like music. Tony Gwynn's bat whispering contact after contact, a craftsman in a loud age. You watch the Yankees build a dynasty again, 4 championships in 5 years, and the nation, though divided by politics and technology, still gathers to watch October baseball. Then comes autumn 2001. The world tilts again. In the shadow of tragedy, New York's Yankee Stadium becomes something more than a ballpark. Flags ripple from every tier. Policemen and firefighters fill the front rows. During the World Series that year, the crowd sings not for victory, but for healing. When President Bush, in a bulletproof vest, throws the ceremonial first pitch, a perfect strike, the entire stadium stands as one. That's another fact worth holding close. In a time of grief, baseball became a language of unity. The early 2000s hum with contradiction, new technology, old scandals. Steroid hearings fill Congress, cameras zoom in on swollen biceps, and fans wrestle with betrayal. But even as record books blur, the game refuses to die. You can't kill rhythm. You can't silence ritual. You travel through this new millennium of flickering scoreboards and smartphone screens. Barry Bonds hit 73 home runs in a single season, his bat a cannon. Ichiro Suzuki arrives from Japan, redefining grace with every swing. Latin American players flood the majors. Pujols, Ortiz, Rivera, bringing a new cadence, new swagger. The diamond becomes global. The quirky side? In 2007, the Colorado Rockies, a team founded barely a decade earlier, make the World Series after winning 21 of 22 games. A streak so improbable fans nickname it Rocktober. They're swept in 4, but it doesn't matter. Every town gets its miracle eventually. And then, 2008. A new stadium opens in the Bronx, gleaming like a monument to the past and future. The Yankees call it home, but it's really everyone's inheritance. The echo of Ruth and Gehrig, Mantle and Jeter, all folded into steel and limestone. You walk its halls at night after a game. The crowd's gone, but the air still buzzes. Down on the field, the grounds crew drags wide rakes through the dirt, smoothing the footprints of giants. The city hums outside, restless, endless. But in here, the rhythm slows. You can hear the faint tap of broom on base path, the rustle of flags in the rafters. That's the thing about baseball. It always finds equilibrium. Too much power, and it redistributes. Too much scandal, and it forgives. It is, in its quiet way, the country's mirror. Impatient, imperfect, but still standing. You sit behind home plate, alone now. The seats are silver in moonlight. On the scoreboard, someone has left a single word glowing in blue. Home. You realize that every inning you've traveled, the muddy fields of the Knickerbockers, the war camps, the roaring stadiums, the strikes and scandals, has been a search for that word. Baseball isn't about perfection. It's about return. You breathe in the smell of earth and grass, the same scent that's risen from every diamond for 2 centuries. Somewhere, in a backyard or an alley, a kid is throwing a ball against a wall, dreaming of tomorrow's lights. Somewhere else, an old man tunes a radio just to hear the crack of a bat, the comfort of continuity. And as you rise to leave, the PA system clicks on one last time, a whisper more than a voice. Thank you for coming out tonight. Drive safe. We'll see you next season. You smile because you know they will. They always do. The century turns again, and you find yourself standing under a roof of retractable steel, high above a perfect field that looks more like an emerald cut by architects than grass grown by sun. The date on the scoreboard reads 2010. But the sound, the familiar crack, the hum of a crowd breathing in unison, could belong to any year. Baseball has crossed into the digital age, but its pulse is still analog, steady as a heartbeat. Down on the field, the pitcher toes the rubber, and 1,000 camera lenses follow his every twitch. The fans in the stands hold up phones instead of scorecards. You can see the glow of screens blinking in the twilight. Each pitch now lives forever, recorded, analyzed, shared, debated. For better or worse, the game has become immortal. You feel the strange duality of this age, the ancient and the instant. Analytics, algorithms, and spreadsheets hum beneath the grass. Data replaces instinct. You can almost hear the numbers whispering between innings. That's your historical fact. Around 2003, a new philosophy known as sabermetrics began reshaping baseball. It started quietly in Oakland, where general manager Billy Beane used data-driven analysis to build competitive teams with limited budgets. His methods inspired a book, and later, a movie called Moneyball. The idea spread like wildfire. Batting averages gave way to on-base percentages. Scouts with gut feelings were replaced, or at least challenged, by statisticians with laptops. You stand beside one of those analysts in a modern press box. He doesn't cheer, he observes. His screen flashes with acronyms, OPS, WAR, BABP. Each number another way to quantify beauty. You ask if he misses the romance of the game, the mystery. He shrugs. There's beauty in precision too, he says, and maybe he's right. But you can't help glancing back toward the field, where the batter adjusts his helmet, taps the plate twice, and waits. The crowd goes quiet, not because of the math, but because of the moment. The pitcher winds up. The pitch cuts the air, and time suspends itself again, like it did for Ruth, for Robinson, for all of them. The ball connects. It arcs into the night, clearing the fence, vanishing into a blur of cheers and camera flashes. No formula in the world can measure that sound. The roar that says something timeless has just happened again. The 2010s are a paradoxical decade. Baseball becomes both bigger and smaller at once. Bigger because global audiences tune in from Japan, Korea, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela. Everywhere the game has planted roots. Smaller because attention spans shrink and rival sports and devices compete for every second. To survive, baseball learns to reinvent its language. You travel to Tokyo, where the stadium hums like a festival. Fans sing coordinated chants for each player. Trumpets and drums echo through the dome. On the mound stands a pitcher named Shohei Ohtani, a two-way phenomenon who hits home runs and throws 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. The crowd adores him, not just for skill, but for spirit, a living bridge between eras, between continents. When Ohtani later crosses the Pacific to join the Los Angeles Angels, he carries with him the promise that baseball's story is no longer America's alone. You wander through the Caribbean next. Fields carved from sugarcane country. Boys playing barefoot until dusk, their laughter rising above the cicadas. Many of them will grow into the future faces of the game. David Ortiz, Albert Pujols, Miguel Cabrera. For them, baseball is not nostalgia, it's destiny. The quirky truth of the decade. Stadiums begin experimenting with virtual reality broadcasts and in-seat chargers, but fans still bring scorecards and pencils. No matter how futuristic the world becomes, some rituals refuse to die. You return to the United States and find the sport grappling with its own ghosts again. The Houston Astros win the World Series in 2017. Then, 2 years later, are caught in a sign-stealing scandal that shakes the game to its core. Cameras hidden in outfield walls, coded signals banged into trash cans, a symphony of deception in an age obsessed with data. The outrage is swift, the punishments severe. Historians will debate the scandal for decades, but you can already sense the pattern repeating. The eternal cycle of invention and sin, of brilliance and betrayal. Baseball, like the nation that birthed it, never quite stops testing its own boundaries. You stand on the infield one spring morning in 2019. The grass is impossibly green, the lines freshly chalked. A group of kids in oversized uniforms shuffle nervously, glancing toward their parents in the stands. The umpire calls play ball, and the pitcher, a girl with a determined grin, throws the first pitch straight down the middle. The crowd cheers. For a second, everything is simple again. That's the quiet miracle of baseball. No matter how complicated it becomes, it always remembers its beginning. And then, without warning, the world stops. You open your eyes to empty seats and silence. The scoreboard reads 2020. A global pandemic has shuttered the stadiums. The fields lie still beneath unplayed sunlight. Banners flap listlessly in the wind. The echoes of past games linger like ghosts above the diamond. You wander through one of those empty parks. The air smells of sanitizer and memory. In the dugout, a lone baseball sits on the bench, collecting dust. For the first time since the Civil War, an entire season feels uncertain. But baseball, resilient as ever, adapts. Players return to fanless stadiums, their cheers replaced by digital ones. Cardboard cutouts fill the stands, piped-in crowd noise hums through speakers. It feels eerie, surreal, but also deeply human. A stubborn insistence that the ritual must go on. A soft drizzle falls as you stand outside the gates, listening to the hollow applause echoing from speakers inside. You think about soldiers in trenches, kids in alleys, barnstormers on rickety buses. All the ways baseball has survived worse than silence. And sure enough, when the real crowds return the next year, they roar twice as loud. Every cheer sounds like gratitude. Every inning feels like homecoming. You move into the present now, into an era of wild contradictions. Baseball is faster and slower, louder and quieter. Pitch clocks keep the game moving. Replay reviews dissect every play. Some fans grumble that technology has sterilized the magic. Others insist it's the only way to keep up. But when the lights flicker on, when the pitcher winds up and the batter steadies his breath, none of that matters. The tension, the timing, the shared gasp, they're still ancient, unchanged. You sit high above a modern stadium, maybe in Los Angeles, maybe in Atlanta, maybe in Seoul, and look down at the diamond glowing like a constellation. You realize this shape, this geometry, has been constant for nearly 200 years. 90 feet between bases, 60 feet, 6 inches from pitcher to plate. Those numbers have outlasted empires, ideologies, and wars. They are the closest thing baseball has to prayer. You close your eyes and listen. The sounds come in layers. The thud of the glove, the rise of the crowd, the faint hum of electricity. The game, for all its changes, still feels like a heartbeat you've known forever. Somewhere down below, a kid in right field shades his eyes against the sun, waiting for the fly ball that always seems just beyond reach. Somewhere in the stands, a father explains the infield fly rule to his daughter for the 100th time, smiling even as she rolls her eyes. Somewhere in the press box, an old broadcaster leans into a microphone and says, "And we're ready for the bottom of the 9th. And you, wherever you are, whenever you are, lean back and feel it too. The arc of the ball, the weight of history, the small, stubborn joy of a game that refuses to end. The quirky, perfect truth of the moment? Baseball no longer needs to chase eternity. It's already there. Every pitch thrown, every glove broken in, every breath held between silence and cheer. All of it adds up to something larger than sport. As the last out settles into a fielder's glove, the crowd stands. The sun dips below the stands, turning the world gold. You can almost hear the whisper of every voice that's ever called out play ball. Stretching back across centuries, you stay a little longer, letting the quiet fill you. The lights dim, the players leave, but the diamond remains, etched into the earth like a memory that refuses to fade. And somewhere deep inside, you know, tomorrow it will all begin again. The lights fade one by one, and when they return, you're standing on a different continent. The air is thick with humidity, sweet with sugarcane, and the sound of baseball carries on the wind. Laughter, shouting, the pop of leather gloves in the Caribbean dusk. The year is 2023, but here, the game feels timeless. Boys play barefoot on fields carved from red dirt. Their bats are dented aluminum, their balls held together by tape. But their swings, pure poetry. You're in the Dominican Republic, the heart of baseball's new world. Around you, posters of David Ortiz and Pedro Martinez fade on cracked concrete walls. At night, families gather around glowing televisions to watch the World Baseball Classic. The crowd cheers for flags now, not franchises. It's baseball without borders. That's your first verified fact. By the 2020s, more than 30% of Major League Baseball players were born outside the United States. The Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Cuba, Japan, and Mexico have become not just feeders, but full arteries of the game. Scouts roam these islands like pilgrims, chasing the next prodigy who can send a ball into orbit. You watch one of them now, a skinny teenager whose swing sounds like thunder. His name doesn't matter yet, but someday it will. Every generation needs its myth. The boy connects again, and the ball vanishes into a palm grove beyond the outfield. His friends shout and chase after it barefoot, their laughter rolling like surf. In that sound, you can hear what baseball has become. Global, restless, fluent in every language except indifference. You travel north again, to Tokyo, to Seoul, to Taipei, where stadiums glow like lanterns against the night. The fans here don't just watch, they sing. Every batter has a theme song. Whole sections sway in perfect rhythm, trumpets blaring, drums pounding. When Shohei Ohtani steps to the plate, the noise reaches a frequency that feels more like prayer than applause. You see him again, that rarest of players, a man who pitches and hits with equal brilliance. His fastball hisses at 100 miles per hour, and his home runs arc into upper decks like comets. Ohtani defies every rule that once defined baseball. He's the first true two-way superstar since Babe Ruth, a century reborn in a single body. And that's another historical fact. In 2021, Ohtani became the first player ever to be named an All-Star as both pitcher and hitter. That same year, he hit 46 home runs and struck out 156 batters. Analysts call him impossible. Fans call him divine. The truth lies somewhere between science and myth. You stand in the dugout one humid night as Ohtani pitches. Each delivery cuts the air like a blade. Between innings, he jokes with teammates, drinks water, and picks up his bat. The crowd never sits. Every face glows in the artificial light. The future, you realize, doesn't feel futuristic at all. It feels eternal, just faster. And baseball keeps evolving. Pitch clocks now tick like impatient metronomes. Instant replay corrects human error in real time. New rules limit defensive shifts, shorten games, and chase pace over patience. Purists groan. Younger fans cheer. The sport adjusts its heartbeat to match the century's tempo. You lean against the dugout rail beside a veteran player, gray creeping into his beard. He shrugs when you ask what he thinks of the changes. Doesn't matter, he says softly. They changed the rules. The ball's still round, the bat's still wood. And 90 feet's still 90 feet. He glances at the field, eyes shining. That's forever. In the stands, you see something rare and wonderful. Families of every kind, every language, every skin tone, shouting in unison. Baseball's diaspora has finally become its strength. The game that once divided now unites, carried forward by names that sound like the whole planet. Acuna, Soto, Judge, Betts, Ohtani, Tatis, the quirky truth of this era. Stadium organists have been replaced by DJs, but the songs, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, Sweet Caroline, still rise between innings. Kids still scramble for foul balls. Vendors still call cold beer here, as if the words were sacred. For all its digital polish, the game remains stubbornly analog in its heart. You travel next to Latin America again, to Havana, where the game persists like an outlaw rhythm. Cuban players, long denied the major leagues by politics, now defect under cover of night, chasing dreams and danger. Their stories fill whispered documentaries, bittersweet and brave. Baseball here is still rebellion, and across the Pacific, the sport blooms in unexpected soil. In Australia, in Israel, in the Netherlands, the game finds new roots. The 2023 World Baseball Classic draws record audiences worldwide. When Japan beats the United States in the final, a duel between Ohtani and Mike Trout, teammates turn temporary enemies. The crowd holds its breath as if the fate of the planet rests on one pitch. You're there, standing behind the mound. Ohtani winds up, his motion clean, almost silent. The ball blurs toward the plate, a perfect slider. Trout swings. Whoosh! Strike three. The world exhales. It's another fact and another myth in the making, but you sense something deeper beneath the noise. Baseball isn't just surviving globalization, it's thriving because of it. The same rhythm that began in ancient stick and ball rituals now belongs to everyone. You think of the Egyptian tomb paintings, the English meadows, the Civil War camps, the lights of Yankee Stadium. The thread is unbroken. You wander through the modern parks. Petco in San Diego, Truist in Atlanta, Citi Field in New York. The seats gleam, the advertisements flash, but the field itself hasn't changed. The chalk lines still divide order from chaos. The bases still glimmer like small altars to motion. And the crowds, oh, the crowds. They come not only for the game, but for memory. Baseball has become an heirloom, passed from hand to hand, century to century. A father teaching his daughter to keep score. A grandmother telling stories about Jackie Robinson under the lights. A son visiting his father's old seat in the bleachers. The game has weathered everything. War, scandal, greed, and now time itself. It is no longer about America. It is about humanity's favorite pastime. Our endless urge to play, to measure ourselves against distance and chance. To run until home is in sight. You stand near home plate at dusk, the modern scoreboard fading behind you. The players have gone, the cameras turned off. Somewhere above, the last seagull circles the lights before heading for the sea. You bend, pick up a baseball half buried in dirt, and feel its weight. The same as it's always been. You turn it in your palm, tracing the seams with your thumb. It feels alive, humming faintly with centuries. Maybe that's the true magic of baseball. Not that it endures, but that it remembers. Every pitch thrown tonight echoes the first one ever tossed across a muddy field. Every cheer carries the same notes sung by Civil War soldiers, by Knickerbockers, by factory workers in dusty hats. And though the world has moved on, though fans now stream highlights on glowing rectangles instead of radios, you can still feel that heartbeat. The quirky side of the future. Players wear sensors now, measuring muscle tension and velocity in real time. Artificial intelligence predicts swings. Robots call balls and strikes in experimental leagues. Some fans claim it's sacrilege. Others call it evolution. But the truth is simpler. The game doesn't care. It will outlast the gadgets like it outlasted the telegraph and the phonograph before them. Because when all the data fades, when the batteries die, what's left is one person with a bat, another with a ball, and an open field. The sun sinks behind the scoreboard. The shadows stretch across the infield like the fingers of memory. The last of the crowd trickles out through the gates. Somewhere, a janitor hums the seventh inning stretch while sweeping peanut shells into a pan. You stay a while longer, watching the horizon turn indigo. The first stars appear above the field lights, faint but steady. You realize the secret at last. The reason the game still feels like prayer. It isn't about winning. It never was. It's about rhythm, patience, forgiveness. About stepping up to the plate, failing, and stepping up again. About knowing that every ending is just another inning starting somewhere else. As night deepens, you close your eyes and listen. The wind moves softly over the field, carrying voices old and new. You can almost hear them. Cartwright and Cobb, Ruth and Robinson, Gehrig and Mays, Otani and the Barefoot Boys and the Dominican Dust. All of them playing together in the same infinite inning. And for a long, still moment, it feels like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for the next fix. It's late. The floodlights hum like tired stars. The stands are mostly empty now, just the rustle of programs under seats, the faint scrape of a broom somewhere in the aisles. You walk down toward the diamond, where the infield dirt still glows faintly beneath the lamps. Every step feels like stepping into a memory. You stop behind home plate. The bases form their perfect geometry before you. First, second, third, and home. A square that has measured centuries, where every journey begins and ends. You close your eyes and hear it all layered together. The crack of wood, the roar of crowds long gone, the whispered prayers of rookies, the belly laughs of old-timers. The ghosts have not left. They've just moved into the wind. Baseball, you realize, has always been a kind of time machine. Every generation thinks it's modernizing it, but really, it's just adding another note to an endless song. The field never ages. The rules shift like tides, but the essence stays. 90 feet remains 90 feet. The distance between hope and heartbreak is still 60 feet, 6 inches. You wander onto the grass, the smell of earth rich and damp. Somewhere, far off, a train horn moans. The same sound fans once heard leaving Ebbets Field, Fenway, Wrigley, the Polo Grounds. For a heartbeat, you can't tell what year it is. The verified fact for this final stretch. As of 2025, Major League Baseball has played continuously for nearly 150 consecutive seasons. It has survived wars, pandemics, depressions, and the full span of the modern world. It is, statistically, the oldest organized professional team sport still running under the same essential rules. You kneel and scoop a handful of dirt from the base path. It feels warm from the day's sun. You let it sift through your fingers, thinking of every footstep that's crossed it. Shoeless, spiked, heavy, triumphant, defeated. Each grain holds a fragment of someone's story. A boy who dreamed too big, a veteran who returned home, a legend who didn't know he was one yet. You walk to the pitcher's mound, the small hill that has launched more history than any monument. Standing there, you can see the entire field spread out before you, symmetrical and infinite. You can almost see every pitcher at once: Mathewson, Gibson, Koufax, Johnson, Martinez. All ghosts of motion, all still mid-windup somewhere in the endless reels of time. Baseball, an old writer once said, is the only place where a man can fail 7 times out of 10 and still be a hero. You whisper that line to yourself, and the words feel like scripture. There's something sacred about failure here. The best hitters miss more than they connect. The best teams lose a third of their games. The game teaches patience, humility, renewal. It teaches that even in a world obsessed with speed and certainty, grace still hides in the pauses. You think about the arguments, about the analytics, the money, the scandals, the endless debate over whether it was better back then. Historians will keep debating it forever. Was the game purer before television? Was it stronger before steroids? Did it peak with Ruth or Robinson or Mays or Trout? The truth is that baseball doesn't have a single golden age. Its glory shifts, refracts, multiplies. Every fan carries their own version of paradise in their pocket. That's the quiet, scholarly uncertainty historians will always return to. The question of when baseball was truly itself. But standing here, you begin to see that it's not a question of time. It's a question of presence. You wander again to the outfield, where the grass runs soft beneath your shoes. The smell of it fills you. Sweet, green, eternal. You remember the countless hands that have tended this grass, the quiet labor that keeps beauty alive. Baseball has always been built on invisible work. Groundskeepers, bat boys, radio engineers, vendors, the uncredited millions who keep the lights burning. You turn toward the scoreboard. It's blank now, waiting. Tomorrow, new names will fill it. New heroes will rise and fall. You imagine a game 100 years from now, played maybe on Mars, maybe still here on Earth. The crowd might wear headsets instead of caps. The pitcher might be a hologram, the umpire a machine. But somewhere in the noise, a father will still be explaining the infield fly rule, and a child will still be catching their first foul ball. Because the human part of baseball, the ritual, the waiting, the miracle of contact, doesn't change. It can't. The quirky truth of this age? In 2024, a minor league team experimented with a silent inning, cutting all music, ads, and commentary for 3 outs. Fans were asked simply to listen to the sounds of the ball, the footsteps, the murmurs of the crowd. It was supposed to be a gimmick, but something strange happened. People loved it. They said it felt like going back in time. Maybe that's what baseball has been trying to do all along, remind us to listen. The wind picks up. Somewhere in the rafters, a flag flutters. A faded American flag beside a rainbow banner. Beside the flag of Japan. Beside one from the Dominican Republic. You smile. The game has outgrown every fence ever built around it. And then, far off, you hear it. A lone crack of a bat. Someone's still playing. Maybe it's a late practice. Maybe it's kids in a nearby lot. You follow the sound until you find them. A group of teenagers under a single flickering light. The bases are just cardboard squares, the ball scuffed white. Their laughter carries on the breeze. The pitcher winds up. The swing connects. The ball sails high, disappearing into the night. The field erupts with shouts. No cameras, no crowds, just pure, joyful noise. You can't help but laugh too. This right here, is why it endures. Not because of money or fame or tradition, but because it keeps finding its way back to joy. It's still a child's game, played by grown-ups trying to remember how it feels to believe in something simple. You linger until the kids pack up, their voices fading down the road. The field empties, leaving only footprints in the dust. You walk back toward the stadium lights, now dimming one by one. Somewhere above, a scoreboard clock ticks softly. 1, 2, 3, and then stops. You take a seat on the bleachers, listening to the silence fill in around you. The air smells of pine tar and cut grass, the faint sweetness of soda spilled long ago. You breathe it in like a lullaby. If history is a story we tell ourselves to make sense of change, then baseball is the version we tell to remember what doesn't. It's the promise that no matter how fast the world spins, there will always be a place where time moves slow enough to savor. The lights flicker once more, and the stadium falls dark. You sit there in the moonlight, and for a moment, it's just you in the field and the quiet pulse of history. The bases glimmer faintly, reflecting starlight. It looks almost holy. You close your eyes. The last sound you hear isn't applause. It's the soft scuff of a ball rolling to a stop somewhere in the outfield. The game never truly ends. It only rests. And so, as the night settles deeper, as the air cools and the ghosts find their seats again, you whisper the words every fan knows by heart. Play ball. Then the wind carries it away. Soft wind down, 300 words. The lights are off now. The stands are empty. The echo of the last cheer drifts into nothing. You can still feel the warmth of the day beneath your feet, but the air is turning cool, quiet. The game has folded itself neatly into memory again, like an old glove set gently on a shelf. You breathe. The field breathes with you. Out there in the dark, the bases glow faintly, ghost lights guiding you home. Somewhere, far away, another field is waking up, and someone is chalking fresh lines into the earth. The cycle turns. The rhythm begins again. You think of everyone who's ever played, watched, or loved this game. The soldiers passing time between battles, the factory workers on summer afternoons, the children tracing diamonds in the dirt, the parents and grandparents who told the stories that kept it alive. Every one of them is here now, somewhere in the hush, and as you listen, the sound returns. Not loud, not sharp, but steady. The heartbeat of the game. The heartbeat of 150 years of afternoons, of laughter, of loss, of hope. You let it carry you. You let it fade. The night deepens. The stars sharpen. The world grows still. And as you drift toward sleep, you realize that baseball has never been about winning or losing, beginning or ending. It's just about coming back. Back to the field. Back to the light. Back home.